Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Yes, I have a sister. By the sleeping zombie. Fem Naruto. The Straw Hats knew that Luffy had an older brother, who was Ace. But at that time, they were not aware of the existence of yet another brother, or even Luffy's supposed older sister. His mysterious older sister who apparently could walk on water and make a bunch of copies of herself. I don't own anything. Adios.
Everyone didn't know what to expect when Admiral Akainu suddenly made a move by rushing to attack the Azukage. Nor did they expect the woman to be covered in a golden light as she also charged forward and bravely received the Admiral's attack head-on. All of them watched with complete nervousness as their fists met and caused a violent shockwave from the impact. Surprisingly, it was clear to see that Akainu's devil fruit power was completely overwhelmed and suppressed by the Azukage's golden aura as his own red aura was getting smaller and smaller. While Akainu was struggling, Naru suddenly raised her leg and delivered a strong kick to the side of his face, thus pushing him away from her. Because of that sudden kick, he was sent directly to the direction of Whitebeard, who had been standing quietly on his spot. Like a ball that had been passed over, the Yonko suddenly raised his arm and easily caught Akainu by his head, before he harshly slammed the Admiral into the ground. Everyone stared in disbelief when they felt the ground suddenly shake and the plaza split into two. It indirectly separated himself with the Marines from the pirates, causing most of them to go into a state of panic. What the heck? He didn't even hold back his strength. And what was even more unbelievable to everyone there was the fact that Akainu was defeated in less than a minute. Looking at the bloodied form of the Admiral, they weren't even sure if the man was still alive. That one brutal move from Whitebeard completely knocked him out. People wondered if kicking Akainu to the direction of the Yonko was just a coincidence from the Azukage or not. What kind of devil fruit allowed her to glow in a golden light anyway? Not knowing what others thought of her, the woman herself looked quite satisfied when she saw the unmoving state of the Admiral. As for Whitebeard, he also felt a great sense of satisfaction when he looked down at the unconscious state of Akainu. He guessed that the man's energy had probably been half drained by that brat before he was sent over to him. Or else, Akainu wouldn't have to suffer a humiliating loss this easily. Feeling that it wasn't enough, Whitebeard kicked him away from him like he was kicking a pebble on the street. Just treat this as a little payback for almost killing his son. Suddenly, feeling the familiar pain from his sickness, he forced down the blood in his throat and cursed silently to himself. He didn't need to further worry the other brats by coughing blood now. As he was dead sure that his time was almost up, he made a final decision and looked towards Marco, who finally managed to free himself from the troublesome cuff. Sensing that he was being stared at, Marco looked in surprise when his father was staring at him with a knowing smile. "I leave the rest under your care," Whitebeard simply said, leaving no room for argument. Marco was taken aback for a while. His palms were sweating and his heart was beating furiously as he processed his father's words. Gritting his teeth, he was torn from the inside as he was struggling with his inner self. He knew what Whitebeard was trying to say, and Marco couldn't find it within himself to accept it. "Marco!" Whitebeard called out his name. Marco clenched his fists, then finally let out a sigh. With tears in the corner of his eyes, he shouted, "Everyone, we're leaving this place." The Whitebeard pirates and their allies naturally saw the brief interaction between Marco and Whitebeard and also heard the words spoken by the Yonko. Hence, despite feeling like they were dying, they didn't say anything when Marco ordered them to leave. They obediently went to board the available ships for them to use to escape from this place. Being the fleet admiral he was, Sengoku would be crazy if he just let these pirates go just like that. With a command from him, the Marines roared as they charged forward to stop the pirates from escaping. "You guys leave too," Naru said. She was still glowing in that mysteriously golden light. "I will stay behind to guard your back, and yes, including you, Sabo." "Are you sure?" Sabo raised his eyebrows at her. He didn't even have the chance to fight anyone yet. Now she was telling him to leave? "Don't worry. I have my team with me," she said. "We'll meet up later." Sabo looked over to her so-called team, who looked confidently at him, and said, "Fine, but be careful." Naru nodded. "All right, let's go," Sabo said to Ace and the others. But before they could even take a step forward, Luffy suddenly wobbled and almost hit the ground if it wasn't for Jinbei's quick reflex of catching his arm. Seeing the worried look on the siblings of the younger man, Ivankov immediately explained what Luffy had gone through to survive to get here, only for the younger boy to be scolded. Despite looking so pathetic for not being able to move his body at the moment, Luffy just laughed sheepishly at their nagging before he passed out for good. The three just looked at each other and sighed, before Ace took the younger brother and carried him on his back. Ace and Sabo gave one last look at Naru before they went ahead and followed the others to the nearest ship. Seeing them leaving, Naru then turned around to face her team. "Do what you have to do. Make sure to not let anyone else get in their way." As you wish, Yuzu responded with a crazed look on her face before she went off to join the battle. Don't worry boss. Hyde gave her a thumbs up before he simply used his devil fruit's ability to cast a thick layer of mist over a group of marine nearby. He then became one with it as his body disappeared into the mist, before he started to launch his attack on the poor marines. Yu nodded to Naru. Her small pair of wings grew bigger before she flew away to the sky with her bow in one hand. Taking one feather from her wing, the feather unexpectedly turned thinner and sharper as it resembled an arrow. She then fired the arrow, causing a huge explosion on where it landed. Barlow, being a man of few words he simply just went ahead to block some marines from advancing further. With her sharp eyes, Naru could see a tiny little bee hovering closely near the man and smiled knowingly. Despite the place being separated into two, it didn't stop the marines from accomplishing their goal to capture the pirates. At the corner of her eyes, Naru saw a certain empress and her pet snake sneakily leaving the place, but she didn't pay much attention to the snake empress when she felt something coming on her way. Naru narrowed her eyes as she easily dodged the incoming attack from a certain admiral, causing quite a lot of damage at where she once stood. That's a very interesting devil fruit you have there, Kizaru commented. To think that you even managed to cause such a thing to happen to Sakazuki. What kind of devil fruit is that? Ho, I thought we all saw how it was Whitebeard who dealt the last blow to him. Why are you blaming me? Naru replied. Both of them were floating in the sky, trying to guess each other's weakness. Kizaru grinned slightly at her. But we all know that you did something with your power first. Naru chuckled but didn't deny his words. She only said, devil fruit? Sorry to disappoint you, but I eat no such thing. However, it is rumored that you're supposed to be the fastest man alive? Kizaru answered by suddenly appearing next to her, seemingly ready to throw a punch. However, he was surprised when she did nothing to move out of the way. But he was even more surprised when she just grabbed his fist with a tight grip, before she proceeded to throw him away directly into the direction of the almost ruined Marine HQ as if he was a rag doll. Once his body crashed into the building, he was shocked to see a big pair of eyes staring down at him. Meanwhile, on Hyde's side, as soon as he coated the area within his range with his devil fruit's ability, he attacked the marines one by one using a sneaky move as he had done so many times before. Since he could just transform into a mist, he could easily be one with attack upon his unsuspecting enemy. But in order for him to land a solid hit, he had to separate himself from the mist, thus exposing his solid body to the enemy at the same time. This mist of him wasn't just a normal mist. Once a person had been exposed to his mist for a longer period of time, the victim's strength and 5 senses would be affected. The longer the person was strapped in his mist, then he might as well be dead. With a weak body that couldn't even see, hear, taste, or feel anything around you, what can you do? Of course, if someone who could use haki or a damn weapon made of kairoseki land a hit on his solid body, then the mist would eventually disappear as his devil fruit's ability would be cancelled. In fact, just one tap was enough. It was such a stupid weakness. Musing over his thoughts, a moment of carelessness almost got himself assaulted by a certain marine captain. A Logia type, huh? Hyde commented as he swung his leg to give a kick, only for his opponent's half-body to turn into a smoke. Smoke? Then you must be Captain Smoker. Really, he could change into smoke, and he even smoked 2 cigars. What a character he was, Hyde thought. Instead of saying anything, Smoker dodged another kick aimed to his leg. Seeing the familiar blackness around the blonde's leg, Smoker cursed under his breath. A haki user. Well, of course someone from the New World would know how to use haki. What the heck did he even expect? Oi, pay attention to your surroundings. A voice appeared on his left. Then he felt a kick under his chin. Damn haki user. At Yuzu's side, beating her opponents easily, the brown-haired woman didn't even hesitate to cut them down one by one, causing blood to be splattered here and there. With how easy she managed to deal with most of them, Yuzu wasn't impressed. Instead, she felt bored. TCH, weaklings, she said apathetically as she slashed another person. She didn't even look properly when a female suddenly charged foolishly at her with such a loud battle cry. Once again, Yuzu didn't hesitate to slash her. Why were some of them even yelled if they wanted to take her down? It was stupid, she thought. Bunch of idiots. She scowled. Then, if you're that bored, then I shall play with you, a man snickered. And she was met with a familiar string that almost cut off her neck. Yuzu immediately grinned. Well. She looked up and saw a familiar man in the air. Good to see you again, Doflamingo. I see that your taste in fashion has become worse. The grin on his face didn't falter, but she knew that he was at least annoyed with her. I didn't know that you're interested in life outside of Mary Joie's, Dorothy, he said instead of responding to her comment. Foo, it's Yuzu now. Plus, why would I want to live a boring life, facing a bunch of retards when I can just do more fun things out here? She snickered. Wasn't that also why you became like this? Blocking another attempt to cut off her limbs, Yuzu continued. Oh wait, unlike me. You didn't actually have a choice in the first place. Ah ha 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 ha. With that, she twirled her body around, slashing his strings and everything in her way, causing deep cuts everywhere. Between you and me, you are the one who has fallen from grace, Doflamingo. You're a disgrace. Ah ha 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 ha. On Yu's side, as a marksman, Yu focused on those who had bypassed her teammates. Even when so many of them were trying to shoot her with their guns or bazookas, she merely flew away. In return, she grabbed a few of her feathers, and fired them back to her attackers, mainly to their weapons. Boom! Their bazookas exploded. She fired another one. Another explosion. The more she fired those feathers that had turned into dozens of arrows, more explosions happened underneath her. With her long silvery hair, her big beautiful silver wings, and her beautiful silver bow, nobody there could deny that Yu resembled that of an angel. An angel that would cause destruction. For her, she considered herself to be a fallen angel, as she did fall from the sky after all. Aiming at the one who tried to do a sneak attack upon her leader, she fired, and the man fell to the ground. Yu saw her leader looked up at her with a smile, and she was glad that she could be useful. Even though she knew that her leader didn't need anyone to protect her. With 2 admirals already down, Aokiji wasted no effort on the escaping pirates. Instead, he focused more on the bigger threat. The Azukage and her companions. Honestly, like Akainu, this wasn't his first time encountering the unpredictable woman. In fact, he was also involved with the mission to wipe out her little empire from the face of the world. Crossing the sea full of whirlpool was not a hard task for him, as he could just freeze the sea. That was the sole purpose of him being required to join the useless mission. To freeze the damn sea and make way for them to reach your island, only for their journey to be wasted anyway. At first, even he was baffled when 2 admirals were to be sent over, wondering how much of a threat could a newly rising empire possess anyway. That was it until they found out that they couldn't even step foot inside the shallow part that surrounded the island. There was this invisible force that acted as a wall to prevent them from trespassing, which was actually quite interesting as he hadn't encountered anything like that before. And that invisible force also absorbed every attack that had been thrown. His ice? Yes. Akainu's magma? Yes. Cannonballs? Absolutely. It was as though that whatever the thing was actually eating them. That was when they knew that the Azukage was definitely someone who held the potential of being a bigger threat to the world government than Dragon himself. Thus, they returned back with their first ever failed mission to obliterate an empire, even with a buster call and 2 strong admirals. However, since she did nothing other than pissing off the world nobles by stealing their slaves, Aokiji wasn't interested to bother himself with her matters at all. But who would have thought that the person herself was the granddaughter of Garp? She even came here for the sake of her brothers and purposely revealed her identity to the world? Why? Why now? Aokiji didn't understand. All in all, Monkey D. Naru was someone that they couldn't underestimate anymore. No, that was wrong. She was someone that they shouldn't have underestimated from the very beginning. Just like how the Straw Hats crew was underestimated before, and now look at the result. Even the 4 companions of the Azukage were not to be underestimated either. In fact, he just saw the Skypine woman used her own feathers as her arrows. The last time he checked, no Skypine could do what she did. She was no doubt a devil fruit user. Seeing the older man from Naru's group blocking the other marines from advancing further, Aokiji chose to confront him. The admiral hardened his arms with ice, and launched an attack to the back of Barlow's head, only for him to turn around and block Aokiji's arms with his own muscular arms. Aokiji wasn't surprised to see that his attack was blocked. He glanced at Barlow's arms, completely coated in haki, and was impressed. This guy knew exactly how to counter a devil fruit user. As expected of someone who lived in the New World. However, in a brief moment, he was distracted by what seemed like a bee floating around his opponent. But that didn't mean that he had lowered his guard, as one moment of carelessness could be the reason for a losing battle. He also didn't say much. Neither did Barlow, who didn't hesitate to attack the Iceman as he swung his arm towards his opponent, who raised an ice shield just in time. At the same time, Naru was still at the same spot as before. Her chakra cloak had already been deactivated. While the others were busy fighting with each other, Naru made sure that every single one of the Whitebeard pirates could board the available ships, leaving no one behind. Marco had already info they would be leaving soon. She only told him to go ahead with the rest without her. From where she was, she could clearly see how her team was doing. Yu was in the air, shooting people here and there. Hyde was messing around with the smoky guy who smoked 2 cigars at the same time. Barlow was engaged in a fight with Aokiji, who was the nicest among the 3 admirals that she met. And Yuzu was trying to kill Doflamingo over there. Sigh. It had been at least 9 years since they met, and the woman was still as crazy as ever. Or rather, she had become even crazier than before, as Hyde had once said. That's what you get for letting a crazy rich girl tag along. A familiar grumpy voice complained. Oh hush. Yuzu is a nice person. She bickered back. Really though, the brown-haired woman may look like a mad bloodthirsty woman as she swung her sword aggressively against a Shichibukai, but she was also a good person. Her craziness was a good kind of craziness, but only for those that she genuinely liked. Then she would turn into a psycho kind of crazy once she faced her opponents. "When are you going to let me out? I'm bored," Kurama yawned. Later, she said, "We'll make it faster, soon, Kurama." Kurama snorted. Naru glanced around the place, and couldn't help but to frown at the negativity that she could sense here. Especially at that one corner where she just threw Kizaru at. Instead of telling them that another unwanted group with a bad vibe was here as they stayed in the shadows, waiting for their time to come out, Naru chose to just let the Admiral know. She detected them the moment they landed on this place, and she was surprised that none of the so-called high-ranking Marines like Garp and Sengoku had yet to detect them. That must have been because the old goat was too busy ordering his men to catch the pirates instead of doing it himself, while her grandfather was just standing beside him as he laughed. Turning her attention away from them, Naru looked at Whitebeard next and frowned even more when she saw how his face was getting even paler than usual. She knew that his condition was getting worse. That old guy would not be able to keep it much longer at this rate. He knew that, she knew that, and his crew knew that. They all knew that his time was almost up. And that was why he chose to remain here. "The least I can do is to keep my children safe. You will help me, right, brat?" "Of course." And he laughed heartily, greatly pleased and at ease. Naru wanted to help, but she couldn't help someone who didn't want to be helped. Hence, she could only let Ace and the others leave this place safely while she stayed behind to guard their back. "Pay attention," Kurama said sharply, "they're starting to move." As soon as he finished his words, she saw the Marine HQ suffered another explosion as Kizaru flew off to the sky and shot a continuous energy blast to the already destroyed building. The others looked at him in confusion. "What are you doing?" Sengoku snapped at him. He already had enough troubles, he didn't need his own subordinate to cause more troubles for him. Upon noticing that something was wrong, everyone automatically paused whatever they were doing to see what was going on. Naru's team even abandoned their battles, and went back to stand by her side. "We have another company," Aokiji, who had a moment of realization, said as he eyed a certain place sharply. When all of the smoke and dust finally cleared up, they saw a huge giant staring down at them. Not only the giant, but there were also some familiar individuals, wearing the prisoner outfit. It was the Blackbeard pirates, plus some highly dangerous criminals that were not supposed to be here. "Zihahahaha, it's been a while, today is such a nice day to witness your death, old man." Seeing that it was truly Marshal D. Teach, Doflamingo was the first to react as he laughed in amusement. "Brilliant. Now this is a pretty turn of events." Whitebeard narrowed his eyes as he clenched his weapon tighter. The sudden appearance of Blackbeard and his companions caused an extreme reaction from both sides. The pirates were agitated because that traitor actually dared to show himself right in front of them, while the Marines were anxious because those wearing the prisoner outfit were exactly the criminals that were supposed to face a death penalty soon. It was said that these people were the most terrible criminals the world had ever known, to the point where they had to be erased from the world due to their brutal acts in the past. The fact they were now walking free was already an unthinkable sight to them, let alone the sight of Shiryu among them. The Marines were baffled. Wasn't this a huge betrayal to the Marines? What the heck? What are they even doing here? For the love of God, why do unexpected people keep on popping from out of nowhere? While the furious Sengoku was busy questioning the sudden act of the Blackbeard pirates and Shiryu, Naru made sure to activate a barrier seal that she learned from Jiraiya once to prevent the Whitebeard pirates from being reckless just to kill Blackbeard, especially a certain someone. And that certain someone was currently banging his fists on the invisible barrier as he yelled out angrily, "Let me out, I will kill that traitor myself." "Stop it, Ace." Sabo tried to hold back his brother, momentarily forgetting that Naru's shield couldn't be breached from either outside or inside. Once Blackbeard had finished with his dramatic speech that made the Fleet Admiral Sengoku speechless, Whitebeard suddenly aimed his infamous quack punch with a great amount of killing intent towards Blackbeard. His sudden action caused that place to crumble completely. But to everyone's surprise, Blackbeard and his group managed to survive that attack with little to no scratch on them, unlike Whitebeard, whose condition had gotten even worse to the point where Naru could feel that his life was fading away fast. She was so anxious that it made her consider whether to just head over there and support him. But Kurama's words stopped her. "You know this will happen sooner or later." She clenched her fists. "I know, and you know that even if you can, he will never allow you to help him." "I know, Kurama. In this world, you cannot help everyone." Naru didn't respond to that, but she knew that he was right, and she agreed with him. She had been living here longer than her life in the Elemental Nation, and as she met a lot of different people, Naru learned from their interactions. And one of the things that she learned from her journeys in these past 10 years was that people here valued pride more than their lives. Just like the prideful Whitebeard who was too prideful to accept her help. At first, it went against her conscience. After all, she used to be the hero who always helped people in need. But that was in the past. In this life, she had to learn to not get involved in everyone's businesses and only help those who genuinely need her help. Don't want her help? That was fine. Be it that way. Just like old man Whitebeard here. She watched as he struggled not to show them his pain and weakness as he claimed that he would never consider that traitorous bastard as his son anymore. Teach killed a crew member, a family, and Whitebeard would never forgive him for that. At that moment, Marco tried to bypass her barrier as he couldn't stand to watch his old man in pain like that. But Whitebeard merely warned them that none of them shall interfere before he gasped in pain, causing the others to be more anxious for him. The candle of light was almost out, and he still wanted to avenge the poor Thatch. Accepting Whitebeard's threat like a challenge, Blackbeard started to let out a visible black aura around him as he cried out, "Black hole!" The black aura appeared from below his feet before starting to expand until it reached Whitebeard. This is the power of the devil fruit that I stole after killing Thatch. The mightiest power, the yami yami no mi. Blackbeard declared. Then he went to insult Watch when the latter was already dead, causing dissatisfaction from the Whitebeard pirates. Naru thought that it was fine if Whitebeard didn't want to be helped, but she sure hoped that he would wipe out that annoying smile on the traitor's face as soon as possible before she did it herself. Just as Blackbeard was bragging about how the other devil fruits were useless against him after absorbing Whitebeard's own attack with his black vortex, Whitebeard surprised everyone again by using his weapon with only pure strength to land a heavy blow on Blackbeard. The Yonko then slammed him hard on the ground, causing him to groan in pain as blood started to flow out of where he was injured by the old man. Said old man then used the hilt of his weapon to keep him in place and commented on how his overconfidence and carelessness were his weaknesses. Then, just as when Whitebeard was about to deal a killing blow on him, Blackbeard shamelessly used the "I'm your son" tactic against him. The act only angered the Yonko even more as he ignored his pleas and crushed him anyway, causing the impact from his power to produce more smoke and dust that instantly covered the old man's form from everyone's view. Once everything was cleared up by the passing wind, the people behind Naru were disappointed to see that Blackbeard was still alive despite all that. Naru could feel that the old man actually put a lot of power behind that blow, but he himself was getting weaker, so it wasn't enough to kill Blackbeard. The Whitebeard pirates suddenly got excited as they urged and encouraged their old man to finish off that bastard, only for him to stay unresponsive to their words. He only has at least 2 minutes left, Naru-san. Shiryu said. With his current condition, I have estimated that he could last no more than that. Those who practiced Kenbunshoku Haki or were nearby would naturally hear what she said. The Whitebeard pirates were disheartened, and Naru just stared blankly at the back of the Yonko with a heavy heart. If only he accepted her offer back then. On the other hand, Blackbeard was baffled with what just happened. How could a dying person even have that much strength left? Looking like he was going through a hysteric moment as he cursed Whitebeard to just drop dead, he then ordered his subordinates to attack him. And attack him they did. The others could only watch helplessly as their dying father was attacked by the enemies while they stayed here, not being able to do anything. But even if they could, they had to respect their old man's order, even if it meant that he was going to die in front of them. Ace looked at his old man, and just like the rest, he also cried as their hatred for Teach grew more and more. Looking at his older sister who trapped them here so that they wouldn't try to help Whitebeard, Ace didn't even blame her for doing this. They all knew that she did this for them. They knew that their old man could be saved if he would just listen to Naru, but he refused. Ace wondered if Naru was hurting as much as he did for not being able to save someone even though she could. He wanted to say to her that she shouldn't blame herself, but the words were caught in his throat as he couldn't even say anything due to his messed up emotions. The worried Sabo who loyally stood next to Ace looked at him in sadness. The only thing he could do was continue to support his brother as he placed a hand on his shoulder. While Blackbeard and his subordinates were mocking and wondering whether the darn old man had finally died, they were startled when the man whom they thought was dead suddenly spoke once again. "It's not you," Whitebeard said slowly, despite the pain that he felt. The blood from his wound kept on dripping to the ground, and there was an acceptance in his eyes that couldn't be seen by anyone but one. Garp stared into Whitebeard's eyes and sighed to himself. Roger must have told him about what he learned, he thought. The person that Roger is waiting for certainly is not going to be you, Teach. Remember, there are many who shall carry on Roger's will, and the chosen one will be among them. And no matter how much you try, none of you will be able to wipe out the will of flame that has been inherited since ancient times. He huffed in pain, trying to catch his breath. Someday, someone will appear, carrying the history of all those decades behind their back, and challenge the world to a fight. At the word, world, he looked at the flag of the world government. And at that moment, he and a certain vice admiral shared a glance before he closed his eyes as he reminisced the memories from his childhood to his prime, finding himself a family, and lastly the last conversation that he had with Roger. Staring at Sengoku, he continued, "You guys in the world government all fear for the day to come." Sengoku was nervous. Regardless of what that Whitebeard was trying to say, he was damn sure that nothing good would come out of his mouth. "I don't care about myself, but as soon as someone finds that great treasure, the world shall no longer belong to you, world government." Sengoku widened his eyes in horror. "No way, stop, don't say it." The day would definitely come, sooner or later. Whitebeard smirked. He then took a deep breath and loudly shouted for the whole world to hear his last words. One Piece does exist. Then no more. Edward Newgate died while standing proudly after telling the whole world that the greatest treasure was out there, waiting for a new owner to come and own it. Naru clenched her fists while the Whitebeard pirates mourned loudly for their old man's death. Sengoku cursed Whitebeard for what he said. There were others who paid respect to Whitebeard's death by lowering their heads in silence. All in all, he was still a legendary man. Others were too stunned to do anything, and there were also those who cheered for the Yonko's death or simply laughed in amusement as a certain Shichibukai did. Marco. Naru called out to the new captain who was crying, "Go, leave the rest to me." The man stared at her, then he nodded as he forced himself to be strong. Not even bothering to wipe his tears, he ordered the rest to set sail for real this time. Naru still needed to make sure that they would be able to leave this place alive. She promised Whitebeard that, and she shall fulfill her promise. Staring at the back of the deceased Yonko that didn't even have the slightest injury as he proudly displayed his Jolly Roger to the world, Naru thought back to the conversation that they once had.
"You only have actually, to be frank, you're going to die soon," she said, one hand underneath her chin as she lazily observed the man in front of her.
He knew, but he still tried to play along. Gurarararara. He laughed before taking a sip of the sake in that huge cup. Bowl? Meh. How long? Old man, you're not even going to last a year, she stated, looking at the ocean as she suddenly thought of Ace, who stubbornly chased after a certain traitor. Who knew what the brat was doing now? Sighing, she then looked at the still smiling Whitebeard, before glancing at those medical equipment connected to his body, and she grimaced. "I can do something about it, ya know? Your illness, I mean." He just laughed at her words, and she wondered if he thought she was lying or something. "Brat, let me tell you a story of a dying man." Instead of concerning himself with his illness, he lived the rest of his life to the fullest. Naru then stared at the sky and thought to herself, "Is this what you wanted? To die with no regrets? Why? Was it because you had already lived your life to the fullest?" Knowing him, that must be it. He achieved his goals, he had gotten himself a family, and he lived his life to the fullest. Just like Roger did. Don't hang around anymore, but our father. Have you forgotten our captain's final order? Leave now? While the others were escaping as the ships were starting to move, Naru frowned when she noticed the wicked smile plastered on Blackbeard's face. She saw his crew taking out a suspicious black cover from out of nowhere and immediately sensed that something was not right. Trusting her instinct, she quickly went to stand protectively in front of Whitebeard's lifeless body that was getting colder. "And what are you bastards trying to do now, huh?" She glared at them dangerously as she leaked out her own killing intent. "You," Blackbeard cried out in surprise. How could he be so careless to forget about this darn woman's presence? With this demon here, how could he proceed with his plan now? If he missed this opportunity now, then he could say goodbye to the old man's devil fruit. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, he hesitated for a while before he finally let his greed and selfishness to consume his rationality as he ordered the rest to attack her. "Attack her! Kill that woman now!" he yelled out in a frantic manner. "Damn you, Teach! What are you trying to do to my sister, you bastard?" Ace cried out in anger upon seeing the commotion. Even Sabo was gritting his teeth in anger next to him. Pathetic. Hyde scoffed as stood quietly with the others. Despite seeing their leader was about to get attacked, they did nothing to stop it. It was because they knew that their leader did not want them to interfere. And Naru herself could easily kill anyone with her aura alone, okay? She absolutely didn't need them. As for the people who were working for Blackbeard, maybe because they had been locked in the prison for too long or they simply overestimated themselves. But seeing that their target was only a woman, they didn't hesitate to attack her. However, they suddenly halted their movements when they felt a sudden sense of dread crept into their hearts at that moment. Seeing that his crew suddenly stopped, Blackbeard was puzzled. "Oi, what's wrong you guys? Kill her." However, none of them responded to his words. They just stood still right there between Naru and Blackbeard. It wasn't like they refused to move or say anything, but they just couldn't. Their bodies refused to listen to them and they find it hard to even look away from the seemingly harmless-looking female in front of them. They just stood there like a bunch of statues and noticed how her previously blue eyes had now turned into a pair of red glaring eyes that instantly sent chills down their spines. Not only that, but a red aura could also be seen surrounding her body, or to be exact, coming out of her body. The aura gave off a completely sinister feeling that struck fear to all of them who were witnessing the sight of that aura, that in the end, slowly formed into a fox head. Until it ended up becoming a solid massive fox baring its sharp teeth to the crowd, letting out a dangerous growl at the same time. It was so big that it even covered the view of the sun as it stood protectively over Naru and Whitebeard's cold body. The shocking thing about the fox would surely be the long 9 tails swaying magnificently behind it. Everyone recognized the creature instantly. Like the phoenix, it was also known as a mythical creature, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. The sight of the majestic creature made everyone's jaws drop to the floor. Maybe because of the way it growled at them, or maybe because of the way it looked at them like they were nothing but just a bunch of ants to it. or maybe because of the frightening aura and the imposing manners of it. But none of them dared to move or even make a sound. Not Blackbeard and his crew, not the pirates, not the marines, and not even Garp. "Hey, Sabo." "Yes, Ace. That fox looks kinda familiar. Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" "Maybe." They both looked at each other for a moment, before nodding their head off. Even though the appearance was different from the last time they saw it, they could recognize it anyway. That was the same fox that always stayed with Naru. Though they were quite surprised to see the fox in this form. Especially Ace, whose memories of his childhood suddenly flashed before his eyes. Kyuubi no Kitsune. Kurama. The Biju. Ace connected the dots as he stayed captivated by the sight of the legendary being. It really exists. "Don't be so surprised." Naru grinned at them. "He doesn't bite." "Like hell," was what went through everyone's head as they stared fearfully at those huge and sharp teeth of the fox as it growled at them. Everyone was stunned. Even the giant in Blackbeard's group was nervous in the presence of the fox. "Let me introduce you to my partner, and also the protector of Uzu," she said. Then the fox roared out so loud that it caused so many of those with weak will and low mentality to pass out right on the spot or get blown away due to the impact of its roar. "Pleased to meet you, humans," Kurama said, smiling evilly at them. "It can talk." Ace and Sabo looked at each other again. Yep, that was the same fox alright, they thought. Hyde and the rest of the Uzu team just looked in amusement as Blackbeard and his gang were completely petrified out of fear. After all, they were so close to the beast that they could be eaten or get impaled by those terrifying-looking claws anytime soon. They flinched when they heard the Azukage suddenly speak in a dangerously low tone. "I don't care what you bastards trying to do, but don't think that I would just let you do anything as you wish with old man Whitebeard's body. The only reason why I didn't interfere earlier was because of the respect that I have for him." She was smiling the entire time, but that smile was scary as hell. "Scram," she said. They blinked, then widened their eyes in horror when the fox suddenly made one sharp spin and whoosh. Next thing everyone knew, Blackbeard and his crew were slammed away like a bunch of flies by all of its tails. The rest watched as Blackbeard and his crew crashed into the rumbles of those ruined Marine HQ, straight through the city behind it, and all the way until they left the Marineford. Certainly, the swing from all of its 9 tails was so strong because those people didn't even stop flying far away until they eventually disappeared without any trace into the horizon. After that, ignoring the baffled, dumbfounded, and nervous look of everyone, Naru calmly sealed Whitebeard's dead body along with his weapon and the coat that had fallen to the ground wordlessly. Then she looked at Sengoku as her team stood slightly behind her and Kurama standing over them. "There are a couple of reasons why we showed up here," she started, gaining everyone's attention. "The main reason is obviously for my brothers, and unlike what you're thinking, Sengoku-san, I didn't and will never join any side. Not the Yonkos, and certainly not the world government." "Then what are you trying to say? Are you joining your father's army then?" Sengoku asked harshly. "Don't be ridiculous." She shook her head in denial. "He is he, and I am me. Just because he's my father, it doesn't mean that I will join his army. No, what I want to say is that my empire is my own power. We're here to officially introduce ourselves to the world." What did she mean by that? She refused to join the Yonkos, didn't want to get involved in piracy, and also didn't want to be allied with the world government. Then, did she want to create another power fraction other than the 3 great powers? That must be it. With everyone there having the same thought, they all looked at Naru in a different light. Sengoku clenched his fists. "Don't think that we will let this matter go, Azukage. Sure, if you have the power, then I don't mind playing around with you, but," slowly, she grinned, before glowing in that weird golden light when she faced Akainu earlier. Then, she flew up to stand right above the fox's head. The fact that both of them were sharing the same wide grin certainly gave them a warning. Everyone's the Azukage raised one arm to the sky, and a mysterious black orb with some little blue and red particles mixed together forming above her palm. At the same time, the fox also opened its mouth as wide as it could, producing the same orb. The only difference was that, while both were bigger than Garp's huge cannonballs, the fox's was obviously bigger than the one created by her. They didn't know what the fuck were they making, but the situation didn't look good at all. They looked like they were about to launch an attack. Attack what? Who? They didn't have a clue. That was until they noticed where they were aiming. They were aiming those terrifying orbs to Mary Joie's. When realization hit Sengoku and the other Marines, it was already too late. Boom. They really just fired those orbs in the direction of Mary Joie's. Since that place wasn't that far from here, they could hear the deafening sound of an explosion even from here, causing them to cover their ears desperately. The impact from their attack made a huge shockwave that eventually caused the sea to split into 2 and big waves appeared. Fortunately, the big waves were not that nearby, or else they could say goodbye to their lives. Especially the devil fruit users who couldn't even swim. Once everything had calmed down, most of them looked at her as if she was a devil incarnate. Well, who wouldn't? With that power alone, she could easily destroy a whole island. Even a buster call was nothing compared to what they did. Seeing her power, the Marines were glad that she didn't participate fully in the fight, or else they would definitely die. Like I said, if you have the power, I don't mind playing with you. She smiled widely at them. As for the attack on Mary Joie's just now, well, just treat it as a form of challenge, and oh, don't worry. I'm pretty sure I aimed for the place with the least people. I'm not that mean to destroy the whole red line. A challenge? This woman was simply crazy, a mad lunatic. With you actions, you're intending to become the enemy of the world government, Sengoku stated furiously. I thought I already did. Indeed she already did. But that was when she used her Uzukage persona and not as Monkey D. Naru. It's bad, Sengoku-san, one of the Marines suddenly exclaimed. It's the red-haired pirates. Sengoku facepalmed. Didn't he just face off against Kaido yesterday? What the heck is this guy even doing here? Maybe because they had been exposed to so many unpredictable things in just one day, but the sight of the red-haired pirates didn't even faze them anymore. Nor was the sight of Shanks and his crew walking towards the plaza with such a calm temperament. Well, I didn't expect it to be this way. Shanks simply whistled with a carefree attitude, smiling as he took in the sight of the barely holding on Marine HQ. What is your purpose here, Akagami? The fleet admiral asked in a very tired tone that Shanks almost felt sorry for the old guy. Sengoku thought to himself that he might as well just resign after this. Why did he even choose to become a Marine? With such stressful work, he should have stayed in his hometown and became a farmer instead. At least it would be less stressful than dealing with this troublesome situation. Originally, I came here to stop the war, Shanks calmly said. But by the looks of it, my presence here is not needed after all. He then looked at the woman who was supposed to be the older sister of Luffy. Nevertheless, I will take it from here. She nodded to Shanks in understanding and then said to Sengoku, I have done my purpose here, we are leaving. The Whitebeard pirates, Sengoku muttered stiffly. You've already won the battle, Sengoku-san. The purpose of this battle is to eliminate one of the Yonkos, and you did it, she said with a subtle smile. The Whitebeard pirates shall leave. The Whitebeard pirates hadn't sailed that far away yet, and she could clearly see them looking at her and Shanks from here. Sengoku didn't say anything for quite some time, but he knew that the current situation was not in their favor. Akainu was still knocked out pathetically over there. There was also the Azukage and her companions. Not to mention the massive nine-tailed fox and the frightening power display earlier. He didn't even know if Mary Joie's was still standing or not. Just thinking about those world nobles coming at him to complain was enough to give him a headache. Now, even the red-haired pirates appeared, which meant that the Marines wouldn't be able to survive a second battle with them. The upper hand of the battle had no longer rested in their hands. From the moment Monkey D. Naru appeared, it was already destined that they would lose the battle. Sighing, he knew what he was supposed to do to avoid another losing battle, and to keep some faces for the world government. Fine. He begrudgingly agreed. They can go. Not like he had a choice in the first place. They may win the war with Whitebeard's death, but at the same time they also lose the battle. Hearing Sengoku's final decision, the rest didn't object. Almost all of them were suffering the worst injuries, exhaustion, and some were still unconscious. Even a fool would know the outcome of the battle if it continued. Thus, they sighed in relief upon hearing that the battle had ended. When she saw that the Whitebeard pirates had already sailed far enough, Naru nodded at Shanks and gave her thanks before she signaled her team to leave. Let's go. Without any words, Kurama jumped and landed on top of the ocean surface, surprising everyone yet again, including the red-haired pirates, that the fox was able to stand on top of the water surface. At the same time, it also confirmed that the fox was not a product of a devil fruit or anything. Naru, who was no longer glowing with that mysterious light, jumped on Kurama's back. The others followed suit. As she scanned the crowd, her eyes widened in surprise for a brief moment when she saw a younger female with a familiar appearance. That female was a Marine and she was holding onto a broken sword. Naru noted a hint of anger and resentment in those dark eyes as she stared at her, and also Yuzu who stood behind her. With one last glance at the one who resembled Kuina, Naru shook her head. No, that's not her. Then she looked over at where her grandfather was, raised her arm and waved at him, who then waved his hand back at her, much to Sengoku's annoyance. Bye, Gramps, bawahahahaha, that's my granddaughter. Shut up. This is all your fault for having such a family, Garp, you idiot. Bawahahahaha. Then Kurama left, leaving behind the almost collapsing Marine HQ. Once they left the place, the tiny bee who had been with Barlow since the beginning suddenly transformed into a young girl with short wavy red hair. Her name was Kana, and she was the one who was talking to Naru via the Den Den Mushi before they arrived at Marineford. She was also the adopted daughter of Barlow, hence her sticking close to the man. Since she was still young, Naru didn't allow her to join the battle and expose her identity. The only reason why she was even there in Marineford earlier than them was because she followed the Whitebeard pirates to oversee the situation and relay the information back to Naru. Leader-san, I did a good job, right? Kana asked as she stared at everyone with an expectation in her eyes. Naru just chuckled and said, "Yes, Kana did great. It was good that you didn't reveal yourself until the end, or else they would probably release a bounty for you as well." "A bounty? But I want one too," she pouted. Barlow placed a hand on top of her head and said, "Once you're old enough." "Like you?" You blinked at the sudden mention of her name. "Yes, once you're old enough like her," Barlow said. "Okay." Kana nodded with a happy smile. The others just smiled at the young girl. Kids were very easy to please, they thought. At least, the sensible ones like Kana. As they were on their way to catch up with the rest, Naru glanced at Yuzu. "Wasn't touch?" "It's okay. If anything goes wrong, then it's the crazy woman's fault," Hyde said with a comforting smile as he tried to assure her and insulted the brown-haired woman at the same time. Foo. You sure as hell don't want to live anymore, huh?" Yuzu snapped back. Even though she was smiling, she also looked like she was ready to unsheath her sword and cut the blonde-haired man in half. Go, Yuzu-chan," Kana cheered. "It's not good to behave like that, Kana." Barlow scolded her lightly. "Hi, HN." Yu just watched them calmly. Her wings had already returned back to their original form, looking like any typical sky person with a useless pair of wings. Naru sighed. Honestly, bombing Mary Joie's was all Yuzu's idea. Thankfully, she only aimed at the area that lacked people. The strength behind her Bijudama wasn't even 100% of its real strength, or else Mary Joie's would no longer exist. But she couldn't say the same about Kurama. Hey, Kurama. The guardian and protector of Uzu, the irony. And her, as the leader, or what other people called her, the Empress of Uzu. Gosh. Who would have known that she would become a ruler of a freaking empire, huh? Life was truly unexpected, she thought. Then, hearing the familiar fighting sound from behind, she sighed. "I want to go home." Once they caught up with the rest, Kurama decreased the size of his body with only one tail remaining. Naru was surprised to see Boa Hancock and her pet snake on board. But regardless of the older woman's purpose of being here, since she hadn't been thrown off the ship yet, then she was okay to be here then. Naru only gave a brief look at the Shichibukai and a small nod. Then, without wasting another moment, with her being surrounded by the Whitebeard pirates, Naru calmly unsealed the dead body of Edward Newgate and slowly placed him in the middle. "Father!" they cried out. Stepping back to give some space for them to mourn their captain's death, she was suddenly stopped by Ace, who grabbed her shoulder and tearfully said, "Thank you, for bringing him back to us." "Idiot," she responded softly. They hugged for a moment before she pushed him towards the rest of his crew. She smiled upon seeing that he was scolded by the rest when he suddenly blamed himself for what happened, before they comforted and supported each other like a family should. Sometimes later, Marco and Yu helped to heal and treat the others who were injured so badly. Yu had the healing ability thanks to her devil fruit, so she was given the task to take care of others, while Naru herself went to heal her younger brother. Getting into her usual mode, she healed up most of his injuries. Seeing the state he was in earlier, that boy really outdid himself this time. And to think that he would do something as reckless as barging into the impelled down and even used a technique of Ivankov that could shorten one's life, she thought that Luffy really needed a good scolding from her. But even though she was mad, she was also happy and proud of him, because she knew that her brother truly possessed a good heart. He grew up well. Although she had left the East Blue 10 years ago, Naru still kept in touch with her brothers via written letters. And of course, like always, her clones over there were the ones responsible to write one and deliver it themselves, disguised as a bird. Since she still had her clones around the Dawn Island, Naru used them to monitor her family for the purpose of keeping them safe. But it wasn't like she had to watch them 24/7, as her clones were also tasked to do other work too. Naru only stopped monitoring her brothers once she found out that they left the island and started their own journey. She considered that if they wanted to start their own adventure, then she shouldn't get involved in their matters too much. Just like how she stopped watching over Ace when he left the island 3 years ago, she also did the same to Luffy when he left the island a few months ago. Naru chose not to interfere in any of their matters, unless it involved a life and death situation that they couldn't escape from. Like Ace's execution. Thankfully, she had enough time to do some preparations. Ace being captured by the Marines was unexpected. So when she heard that the Marines had already set a date and time of when he would be executed, Naru decided to come out of her hiding. What she said to Sengoku was all true. She came to save him, but she also took advantage of the situation to announce her existence to the world. Still, she had to thank the world government for delaying Ace's execution. Imagine if the Marines decided to kill Ace on the spot instead of announcing it to the world and wait for Whitebeard to appear. Naru would have lost her brother then, and she would have done something terrible to the world government herself. Just like Luffy's case in Enies Lobby. If he were to lose the battle there, then it would have been too late even if she managed to find out about it later. Since she chose not to monitor him, Naru didn't know what he was up to since Luffy himself had been so random and quite unpredictable with his adventures so far. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to get out of the situation alive. At least his victory over the world government made their father proud. The world government was unlucky because Naru was the older sister of Ace and Luffy. If anything were to happen to them, then she would step out of her hiding and do everything that she could to fight the world for the sake of her family. In her past life, revenge was something that she wouldn't choose to do if she could help it, but after living here for the past 22 years, as she experienced more wisdom through so many life-changing events in her life, her perspectives of life had also changed greatly. The only things that she cared about now were her family, friends, and her kingdom. Therefore, it was good to say that Naru was not someone who would sit back and watch as her family was being hurt. Right now, Naru was inside one of the available rooms where Luffy was resting. The boy was sleeping soundly on the bed when the door was opened. She looked over and saw that it was just Ace. He went to stand next to her and asked, "How is he?" "Other than severe exhaustion, he should be fine. Just let him sleep for now." "That's good." He heaved out a sigh of relief. "Sabo?" "I saw him talking to that weird guy from the Revolutionary earlier," he said, and she nodded. Since both came from the same army and Ivankov hadn't been outside the prison for so long, it made sense for Sabo to talk to him. For a moment, silence engulfed them. Ace looked at Naru, who had this calm expression on her face, and he opened his mouth. "Hey, thanks for coming. I didn't expect that the two of you would show up together." Naru raised her eyebrows at him. "Fool. Our brother was about to be killed, of course we would come." Ace just laughed nervously and didn't know what to say. Usually he wouldn't be like this. He knew that Naru and Sabo had always contacted each other. They all did. If Naru knew of his problem, then Sabo would naturally know about it too. It was just that Ace was still affected by what happened today, that he couldn't function like always. Naru understood that. "What are you guys going to do now?" Ace gulped and lowered his gaze to the floor, avoiding her gaze. "Marco said that father will be buried somewhere near his homeland in the New World. I trust Marco. He knows what he's doing." Naru didn't say anything. Instead, she just stared at this person whom she had raised ever since he was a baby, and she couldn't help but think of that time when he was still a kid. Despite only being a couple of years older than her, she felt like it was only yesterday that Garb brought back the baby that always cried in the middle of the night or when he was separated from her. Now as she looked at the current Ace, Naru could only smile in melancholy. With a soft smile, she said, "You know, Ace, it's okay to cry if you want to." And the tears fell once again. The next morning, Igor. Unlike yesterday when he looked like he was about to die out of exhaustion, he appeared to be a lot better now. As if he didn't just go through multiple death situations. The moment he woke up, he went to look for food and his siblings first. So the four of them ended up spending the whole morning together and caught up with what happened for the past 10 years. Even though Naru had always kept in touch with Luffy and Ace before they left the East Blue, she didn't actually tell them anything regarding what she had been doing. Ace only found out once Naru went to see him, and that was after he had already joined the Whitebeard Pirates. Naru herself was actually quite familiar with the Whitebeard Pirates as they helped her a few years ago. As for Sabo, since he was now in her father's army, Naru often went to find him too. Which meant that she also had contact with dragons sometimes. And surprisingly, if she ignored the fact that he abandoned his children, the man was actually a good person. It took years for Naru to actually start treating him like a parent, but at least now she wouldn't have to pretend like she actually had any familial feelings for him just because he was her father. What he did was still wrong, even though she could understand him. Up until now, Naru believed that he decided to not take care of his children due to his position as a criminal and that he was fighting against the government. Luffy was the same as Ace. The letters that she gave him didn't have any information of her being the Azukage or anything. All he knew was that his older sister went to the Grand Line when she was 12 and had been living in the New World since she was 16. And now that they had met, there was nothing wrong for her to tell him enough to let him understand what his older sister was capable of. Luffy was very excited to find out that Naru was actually a ninja this whole time. How cool was that? No wonder she could do a lot of magic tricks when they were kids. To entertain his childlike curiosity, Naru just showed him some harmless little tricks like the Cage Bunshin, Kowarimi and Henge. Those 3 simple jutsus were enough to make him happy. In return, Luffy told them the stories of his adventures with his crew. Since Ace had already met half of his current crew in Alabasta, Luffy focused more on Naru and Sabo since they hadn't seen each other for 10 years except for some letters. Now he was just done telling them of his crew's encounter with Kizaru and that Kuma guy who caused his crew to be scattered everywhere. He didn't know where they could be right now, but he was still confident that they would be just fine. After that, Luffy was informed by his sister that they would be heading to the New World for Old Man Whitebeard's funeral. Hearing that, Luffy expressed his desire to stay behind. He couldn't just go to the New World without his crew and his ship. Who knew what happened to the Sunny Go ever since she was left behind? Frankie would be mad if something were to happen to the ship. Plus, after what happened in Sabaody, Impel Down, and Marineford, Luffy realized that he and his crew were not ready for the New World yet. If it weren't for luck and his new friends that he made during his struggles, don't even mention leaving Impel Down because he sure as hell wouldn't be able to get close to the prison if it wasn't for Hancock. That was why he'd rather stay behind and train for some time before leaving for the second half of the Grand Line with the rest of his crew. He'd rather earn the right to enter the new world with his own strength than simply following his brothers and sister there. How could he even dream of beating them if he still needed to depend on them? What do you think, Naru? Ace asked for Naru's opinion. Naru just shrugged her shoulders. She didn't know why they even needed a confirmation from her when they were old enough to make their own decisions. If Luffy wants to do so, then why not? Luffy's face lightened up immediately. Okay, so you want to train, but with who? Do you want me to send someone to train you? Or do you want me to train with you, Luffy? Ace asked. Before Luffy could give his answer, a hoarse voice interrupted him. The four of them immediately turned to see a familiar old man at the doorway. I can train you, was what he said. Familiar with him, Luffy greeted him first. Really? Dark King, really? Ace muttered stiffly under his breath. This was the person who had sailed alongside his bloodfather until the end. Honestly, Ace didn't know what to feel about him. Naru looked at Rayleigh, who smiled at her. Maybe it was a trick of light, but she thought she saw a brief sign of recognition and nostalgia in his eyes. Naru brushed away the weird feeling and thought to herself that it was probably because he recognized her identity or something. Hello there, Ace. Rayleigh greeted the obviously stiff Ace with a genuine smile. Hello. No matter what connection this old man had with Roger, Ace didn't forget about manners and responded back to Rayleigh with a nod. Rayleigh didn't say anything about the awkwardness in the room that was caused because of his presence. Instead, he just looked at Luffy and went straight to the point. I can train Luffy-kun if he wants to. In 2 years, I dare to say that he will be ready for the new world when that time comes. Naru knew about Rayleigh's terrifying reputation as a powerful individual, and he was also a good person based on what she heard from some people. She knew that he wasn't the type to meddle in other people's business, and no Marine dared to mess with him. Honestly, she didn't see a problem with Luffy training under him. What do you say, Luffy? She glanced at the boy. Luffy held his chin as he pondered about the idea of training under Dark King Rayleigh for 2 years. Making his decision quickly, he agreed without any hesitation as he nodded his head at the old man's offer. Then that's settled. Rayleigh stated with a pleased smile. With his business here already settled, he waved at them first before he left the room to visit a certain captain. Once he left, Sabo asked Luffy, what about your crew? How are you going to contact them if you don't even know where they are right now? Ace nodded his head in agreement with Sabo's words. Sabo is right. Once they hear about what happened, they would surely try to find a way back to Sabaody to come and get you. You mentioned before that each one of you have Rayleigh's pieces of Vivre card, right? Luffy nodded. Then it should be easy for them to find you, Ace said. But knowing you, you must have wanted them to also train for 2 years like you, right? Yeah, don't worry about that. Here, take this. Naru suddenly handed him a snail with a button on top of its shell that appeared from out of nowhere and explained about its function. It was basically a den mushi that allowed the user to record oneself, including the audio. If one pressed the button on top of its shell, a hologram would appear and play back everything that had been recorded. This den mushi was mostly used for sending visual letters. While Luffy was fascinated with the snail, Naru continued. After you're finished, I will send each copy to every single one of your crew. But how are you going to find them? I have my ways. She winked at him. With a large spy network in every part of the Grand Line, finding some people wouldn't be too hard. Thinking that his sister was so cool, Luffy went to film himself on the spot. He said, hi, and introduced his brothers and sister before ordering his crew to train hard, and they shall meet once again in 2 years at Sabaody. When Naru thought about a certain swordsman, she wondered what would be his reaction once he found out that his childhood friend was the older sister of his captain. After all, she had never told him of her full name. Amused, she thought that fate was indeed interesting. After Luffy was done, he gave the snail back to Naru when they heard someone knocking on the door. After telling the person outside that it was only Boa Hancock who came in with a weird behavior as she kept fidgeting on her spot with reddish cheeks. Somehow, Naru was reminded of a certain shy Hyuga heiress as she observed the Shichibukai. Oh, Hancock. Luffy was the one who greeted her first. Luffy. Oblivious with her weird behavior, Luffy thanked her for all the help that she provided him with. Being given such a bright smile from the person she admired, the taller woman seemed like she was about to pass out anytime soon, much to Naru's amusement. Is there anything that you need, Hancock-san? At the sound of Naru's questioning, the pirate empress immediately snapped back into reality and put on a polite smile on her face as she faced her future sister-in-law, shyly. I heard from Rayleigh-san that Luffy needs a place to train. If he doesn't mind, I know a place. Really, Hancock? Why yes. She nodded as she cupped her face in embarrassment. Naru's life here for 22 years plus 17 years in previous life would be wasted if she still didn't understand as to why the Shichibukai was acting like this. Thus, she was very amused to see this kind of thing happening right in front of her. Not to mention that it happened to her dense younger brother no less. She glanced over at Ace and Sabo, wondering if the two realized the same thing she did. only to see them talking to each other as they ignored the others in the room. Naru rolled her eyes. Another two dense fools. The next day, after paying their own respect to Old Man Whitebeard, others started to leave. Sabo left first with his fellow revolutionaries. Then Naru and Ace watched as Luffy, Rayleigh and the female Shichibukai departed to Amazon Lily. "Naru, we're ready to go," informed Ace. Naru nodded her head. The others watched as she took out her gravity seals and used them on every part of the ship so that the ship would be light enough to cross over the red line easily. This way was much faster than using the usual route, which was going underwater just to reach the new world. It didn't take long for them to arrive at their destination. Once they arrived in the new world, they immediately went to Whitebeard's homeland. Since Naru had kept the man's dead body in her seal, the body was still as it was when he first died, so it hadn't rotted yet. And as Marco had decided, Whitebeard was buried on an island near his homeland. During the funeral, Naru wasn't surprised to see a certain redhead. Shanks talked to Marco and Ace for a while before he paid his respect to Whitebeard. Once the funeral was done, Naru and Shanks had their own private conversation. So, sitting across her was the captain of the red-haired pirates himself. He was pouring her a cup of sake, before doing the same thing for himself. "I didn't expect that Luffy's older sister that he always talked about before would turn out to be you, the ever-mysterious Azukage. But that actually explains a lot." "Oh, about what?" she asked. Not feeling shy, Naru went to gulp down the entire sake and felt the familiar burn in her throat, finishing it in one go. The good thing about being Kurama's jinchuriki was that, no matter how much she drank, she would never get drunk since Kurama's chakra would prevent the toxicity of the alcohol to harm her body. Very nice indeed. Shanks didn't mind her behavior. 10 years ago, I stayed over at this one small village in East Blue. I stayed there for a year and met a certain kid. And for some reason, I kept having this strange feeling of being watched. When I finally managed to detect a certain presence, it stopped. "Interesting," Naru said with a poker face. "But you see, the thing is that I always sensed the same presence from several different locations at the same time." He continued with a grin. "Though I didn't have a clue as to why the same presence was able to split into many places, but I'm pretty sure that was you." Naru didn't flinch when she was met with the man's piercing gaze. Instead, she stayed calm as she had already seen this coming. One time, she had almost been discovered by the redhead once, and since then her clones had stopped monitoring him and his crew. Even so, her clones were still around to keep things in check, and they were still around even after the pirates had left. As expected of someone like him. And come to think of it, combining her age in 2 lifetimes, she should be around the same age as this man. "Yeah, that was me," she admitted casually. "Or my clones, whatever you prefer." "I knew it. I actually had my guesses when I recognized your presence a few years ago. Turns out, you're Luffy's older sister after all." He suddenly laughed boisterously as he slapped his thigh, much to her slight annoyance since he was being too loud for her poor sensitive hearing. "I actually heard a lot about you from him. It never crossed my mind that you managed to raise both Luffy and Ace alone." At the mention of Ace's name, she looked at him knowingly. Shanks was Roger's apprentice, and he had also met Ace once when he was still at the village 10 years ago. At that time, Shanks was still clueless of the fact that Ace was the kid of his late captain. He remembered that one day when Luffy wasn't around, he and his crew were approached by 2 boys who were obviously older than Luffy himself, and they introduced themselves as the kid's older brothers. Those 2 boys were precisely Ace and Sabo. They approached him for the sake of introducing themselves, as they were worried for their brother who had been spending a lot of time with a pirate crew. After that, Shanks had never seen Ace again, until that time when Ace brought his crew to see him just so that he could express his gratitude for saving Luffy when he and Sabo weren't there for him. And that was it. "I wasn't alone," Naru stated. It was the truth. She had Dayton and the bandits, Makino and even the mayor come and look after the boys when she was not around. So yes, she wasn't alone when it came to the topic of raising the boys. Though, if asked, the mentioned people would say that Naru was the one who contributed a lot in raising the kids. Shanks blinked at her answer and just smiled, of course. "Alright, what exactly do you want to tell me?" she asked impatiently. She knew that he wanted to tell her something, and she just wanted him to just get to the point already. "I just want to warn you about what you're doing," he said. Finally, she thought. Sighing, she stared at him with a serious look for a moment, before she suddenly burst into a soft chuckle. "You don't have to concern yourself with my affairs. I know what I'm doing." "Do you? If you're talking about me attacking the Mary Joies and becoming enemies with the world government, then rest assured, I am not going to do it again," she said. "What I mean is that, I only did that because I want the world to know that I am not someone who can easily be bullied. I did this for my people." Her people, the former slaves of the world nobles. Shanks just stared quietly at the woman sitting across him. He knew that she could handle her own affairs, and he also happened to see her little display of power before, and it had to be said that he was greatly impressed. As a Yonko himself, he was also aware of the brief conflict between her and Big Mom years ago. And for her to escape Charlotte Linland's wrath with no scratch, her mysterious abilities, the weird but great defense that she had over her island, and the legendary mythical creature that she had as a partner were enough to prove that Naru's strength was at least one pair with a Yonko. It was a shame that she wasn't a pirate, or else she would definitely replace Whitebeard's position as a Yonko right away. Perhaps, maybe she was the one who might be in his position instead of him. But unfortunately, she wasn't a pirate. Naru was no ordinary lady, and he knew that she was a capable woman. But still, he needed to warn her. As your new friend, I want to say that you should be extra careful with the people from the world government. Why? He stated. Naru's eyes narrowed, and why is that a big problem? In this world, they also have their own version of Kyuubi. But this Kyuubi that he mentioned should be the real mythical creature and not Kurama the Biju. Which meant that there should be two Kyuubis at the moment, with Kurama being a fake one since he didn't belong in this world. For all she knew, the real one should be somewhere else in hiding or something. Not that she cared about it. Could Shanks have mistaken her Kurama as this world's Kyuubi? That could be the case. I just heard that having the Kyuubi is a big deal for those at the world government. So you showing it to the world that you and the beast are partners would probably trigger something. It's him, Naru suddenly said, ignoring the main point of Shansuke's words. The Kyuubi is a male, and his name is Kurama. Shanks was taken aback at the seriousness in her voice, but he brushed it off and grinned at him, of course. He would like to say more about the matter with the Kyuubi, but knowing that she would most likely not going to listen, he raised his cup at her and said, "Well then, good luck in whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Don't worry. I have been told that I have a great devil's luck on my side." She grinned at him in response, raising her own cup at him. "Knowing whom you're related to, I have no doubt about that." And so they clinked their cups and drank at the same time. Once the battle in Marineford had ended, the news had been spread to every part of the world in an instant. Many things happened in one single day that made people wonder whether those truly happened or not. But the pictures attached in the articles and the video of the battle said that yes, they really happened. The successful rescue mission of Portgas d'Ace, who was also the one and only son of Roger. Vice Admiral Garp's family was full of outlaws like Dragon, the Azukage, and the rookie pirate Straw Hat Luffy. The bold action of Naru who attacked Mary Schwaz. The appearance of the legendary mythical creature Kyuubi. And of course, the death of Edward Newgate. The man who once competed with the late Pirate King once upon a time, had finally died at the age of 72. He was the legendary Whitebeard, feared and respected by many. He who lost his life as he stood as prideful as he was without even a single scratch on his back. It was certain that the story of the battle in Marineford would be passed down to future generations. And more importantly, after the battle, powers would be shifted. And those who had been staying quietly in the dark for so long would never be able to stay quiet anymore. This was just the beginning. Location, Whole Cake Island. Then the Azukage has been acknowledged to be on the same level as a Yonko. The people even claimed that she would have succeeded Whitebeard's position if she was a pirate. Charlotte Linland, also known as Big Mom, narrowed her eyes when she listened to the recent report of what happened. Due to her cold, frightening aura, the people around her couldn't help but to tremble in fear. A Yonko, she hummed unpleasantly. Monkey D. Naru? HMPH. To think that she is actually related to Garp and Dragon at the same time. What a frightening lineage. Are we going to do something about this, Mama? Smoothie asked nervously on the other side. The rest of the generals or Big Mom's children with a high-ranking position were also there. All of them were afraid to make any noise and offend the female Yonko, since their topic of discussion was a very sensitive topic to her. Can you handle her? Big Mom glanced at her daughter with a cold glare, which froze the woman into being speechless. Seeing how scared she was, Big Mom snorted. As I thought. Katakuri, who was leaning against the wall, had an unknown gleam flashed across his eyes. Doesn't she have a younger brother who just entered the Grand Line not too long ago? Yes, Mama, Parasparrow answered. His name is Monkey D. Luffy. Big Mom grinned. Perfect, since we can't touch Garp, Dragon and that woman, then it falls onto the younger one to bear the sins of his elders, right? But Mama, would it be wise? Cracker gulped. He couldn't even imagine what the demon would do if they made a move against her younger brother. Didn't she reveal her identity, attack Mary Schwaz and become the enemy of the world just for the sake of her brothers? Plus, all of them still remembered that day, and they certainly didn't want to experience it again. No worries. Big Mom smiled creepily as she held onto the Luffy's and Naru's wanted posters. It's not like we're the one who is going to make trouble with her. Mama. Then Big Mom suddenly laughed out loud, causing the others to flinch. A while later, she went silent before they heard the familiar gritting sound as she spoke in an eerie low voice. I'm hungry. Location, Dawn Island. In a certain bar, Makino was holding a recent newspaper as she read out loud about what Naru and the three boys did. The people here cheered as they celebrated the achievements of the four people as they all came from the same island. Only the mayor grumbled about how much trouble those four would bring to their peaceful village, although anyone could see the pride in his eyes. At the same time, in Dayton's house. "Boss, you have to take a look at this," Dagras shouted as he shoved the newspaper to the orange-haired woman. "What is it this time?" Annoyance displayed on her face as she took the newspaper away from him. A couple of minutes later. Meanwhile, in a certain mansion located in the high town. Darling. Didit called out to her husband anxiously. Outlook the third's hands trembled. To think that boy would end up becoming a revolutionary. Even that demon is now a powerful empress that even dared to challenge the world government. He took a deep breath and looked at his wife. "Go and tell Stelly to not cross the line or else we're dead." She gulped. "Why yes. Location, Shimotsuki village." "Azukage, Uzu, Kyubi," Shimotsuki Kozaburo muttered under his breath, clearly amused with what the young girl in his memories had achieved today. He chuckled, then he looked up to the sky as he enjoyed the gentle breeze of the wind. Somehow, he wasn't surprised to know about the whole thing. His gut feelings were right after all. That little girl who stumbled upon his small village years ago, had finally started to walk on the path that was meant for her. It couldn't be anyone else but those who bear their will within them. Location, Kuraigana Island. It was a desolate island somewhere in the Grand Line. It was said that there was a war that broke out on this island years ago that eventually ruined a kingdom. The place itself had nothing but a gloomy mist covering the whole island, the remnants of the ruined kingdom, and an abandoned gloomy castle. At first, it wasn't supposed to be occupied by anyone since nobody was brave enough to even set foot into a gloomy and seemingly haunted island. Well, nobody but one. Dracul Mahawk was an exception as he preferred this kind of place for him to stay. After the war, the Shichibukai immediately left the Marineford and went back to his one lonely island. However, he didn't expect to see two unwanted visitors that he actually recognized instantly. One was the one who claimed that he would beat Mahawk and take away his title as the world's strongest swordsman, while the other one was the subordinate of his fellow Shichibukai. Roronoa Zoro and the ghost princess Perona. At this moment, Mahawk was facing Zoro. That boy was staring at him like he had seen a ghost. Mahawk had just told him about how Straw Hat Luffy just made an appearance in the middle of a war between the Marines and the Whitebeard pirates for the sake of saving his big brother from his death. Being questioned by Zoro, the Shichibukai didn't hide anything from him. He told the boy everything that included Luffy's whole family. The part where Ace was almost killed by a kainu to protect his little brother, only for their big sister to appear and save them. Hearing that his captain almost died without his crew by his side, Zoro was horrified. Well, what else was he supposed to feel? He just got separated from his crew for a few days with no way of knowing whether all of them were okay or if they went through the same thing he did. And when he finally managed to hear about his crew, it was about his captain who broke into a damn prison recklessly to save his brother, and said brother was even supposed to be executed, and based on what Hawkeye had said, Ace had already been captured when the crew was on their way to Sabaody. Thinking of when Luffy was staring absently at Ace's burning Vivre card, Zoro wondered what would they have done if they had known that Ace was in such a big trouble. Probably joining the war. Yeah. The crew was loyal to their captain. They would have done everything that they could to help him. Even though he was still in turmoil about what happened to his captain, he was relieved to know that he was fine in the end. So, where is he now? Zoro asked. He needed to be by his captain's side. Even though Luffy was fine now, he still wasn't sure about the rest. He doubted that the others were together, or else Luffy wouldn't be all by himself as he dashed to his potential death. The fact that Mahawk said earlier of how Luffy appeared with another group of people instead of his crew, confirmed his suspicion that the crew was probably separated by Kuma. If that really happened, then knowing them, they would most likely try to find their way back to Sabaody just like him. At least, they still got their own piece of Rayleigh's Vivre card to make it easier for them to find their way back. The last time I saw him, he was with his brothers and sister, Mahawk said. I need to leave now. Zoro grunted in pain as he attempted to stand up despite his horrible injuries. Mahawk didn't try to stop him, he even lent a boat to the younger man. However, before Zoro could even move away from his spot, they both heard a cry of a bird from above. Looking up, there was indeed a bird flying in a circle. Upon being noticed, the bird lowered itself to Zoro before dropping off a small box before it flew away. Zoro blinked and was dumbfounded at the box before he decided to open it anyway. What he saw inside was a piece of paper and a small den mushi with a button on top of its shell. He took the paper first, unfolded it and his eyes immediately went wide when he saw a familiar name written on it. Monkey D. Luffy. Without any hesitation, Zoro took out the snail and pressed the button with Mahawk still standing over where he was, staring curiously at him and the snail. An image suddenly popped up, showing his captain with that familiar big smile on his face while being covered from head to toe with bandages. Hiya guys, I hope everyone is doing fine. As you can see, I'm fine. I know I said we should meet in 3 days in Sabaody, but I've realized that we're not truly ready for our next adventure yet. That's why, as a captain, I'm telling you guys to meet me at the same place in 2 years. Luffy announced as he raised 2 fingers with such a serious look. Oh, "You guys, this is my other brother, Sabo." He dragged a blonde-haired man to his side, before pulling a woman to his other side. "And this is my older sister that I told you guys about before, Naru-ne-chan." Zoro completely ignored the Sabo guy when he introduced himself. His eyes only focused on the woman beside Luffy. That face, that eyes, that line on her face, and that name, even though it had been 10 years since the last time they saw each other, he still managed to recognize her. But just to be sure, he looked over at Mihawk and pointed a trembling finger at the woman. "Is that really Luffy's older sister? The one that you said to be the cage thingy?" "Yes, she is." Mihawk nodded. Of course it was her. How many females did he think possessed those 3 lines on their cheeks, had a pair of blue eyes and named Naru at the same time? Only one, staring stupidly at the familiar but also unfamiliar face. He thought that she didn't seem to change that much. However, he knew she must have changed a lot if she became who she was today. After all, it had been 10 years. Some things and some people were meant to change. Even he had changed. Unconsciously, he began to reminisce about the past as he gripped the Wado Ichimonji tighter. The last time they saw each other, she told everyone that she would be leaving for the Grand Line soon. That was when Kuina was still alive. He wondered if she was aware that Kuina had already died. Seeing the look on Roronoa Zoro's face, Mihawk said, "You seem to know her." "Huh?" Zoro blinked. Then realizing that the older man was referring to Naru, he confirmed his words. "Yeah, we met when we were kids." Mihawk nodded and didn't ask anything. "If you still desire to leave, the boat is over there." Hearing that, Zoro went silent. At that moment, he thought back about the battle in Thriller Bark, the incident in Sabaody, and the words from his captain just now. If Luffy managed to send a message to him, then the others would naturally get one from him too. His captain said that they were not ready yet for the new world. Instead of feeling offended, Zoro agreed with him, and he knew the others would agree as well. In Sabaody, there was the admiral and that big weirdo in red, along with Kuma. Because of them, they got to taste real fear through powerful opponents that could easily crush them if they wanted to. What if they were to meet an even stronger opponent in the future with the same strength that they currently possessed? Would they even survive? Or would they die? Didn't Hawkeye say that Luffy came to Marineford with a different group of people because he didn't have his crew with him? A captain who went to join a war without his crew by side to support him sounded like a joke to Zoro. How could he even allow such a thing to happen once again in the future? This time, Luffy was fine. But what if when they were not by his side, something bad were to happen to him again and the crew would still be clueless about it? Just like when his captain decided to barge into the most dangerous prison alone for Ace that happened just a few days ago that he wasn't even aware of. If things went bad, his captain might die and they still wouldn't have a clue. If Naru wasn't there. Zoro shook his head. He refused to think about it. His captain was fine. Thinking about the past would not change the past. Looking at his swordie, his captain kept ringing in his ears as the memories in Thriller Bark and Sabaody kept on replaying in his head. Suddenly, he looked at Mihawk, who was still looking down at him. This was the man that he had to beat in order for him to become the world's greatest swordsman. Hardening his eyes in determination, Zoro made a decision. Somewhere in the Grand Line, a man was holding onto a stack of articles with a very serious look on his tattooed face. He looked so serious that nobody dared to disturb him. Dragon's eyes traced every single word written on those articles carefully. Even he himself didn't know how many times he had read those articles since they landed in his hands. Allowing a small curve to appear at the corner of his lips, the man marveled over the photo of the true appearance of the Azukage on one of those articles. He, as a father, of course knew of his daughter's identity as the mysterious Azukage. Sometimes she'd come to visit Sabo, and him being Sabo's leader and her father, would naturally see her once in a while. Because of that, it could be said that their relationship as a father and daughter had improved a lot over the years. Although he was a bit disappointed that she refused his invitation to join his army, he accepted and respected her choice. Someone like Naru meant to rule, instead of being ruled, although the leader of the army was her own father. Regardless, Dragon was so proud of his 2 children. Aside from his father who chose to become a marine, even though he too hated the world nobles, their little family were all meant to oppose the world government. And from what he had gathered, it seemed like his old man would be resigning from his position soon. Dragon was also aware that his father and daughter had also been in contact several times for the past years. Just like him, Garp was also aware that Naru was the Azukage all these years. Dragon shook his head in amusement over his family's situation as he put away those articles about his children's achievements in a drawer that solely contained the old articles about the Azukage for the past 6 years and Luffy's first wanted poster until the latest. There was pride in his eyes as he briefly glanced over them, until his sharp eyes landed on an old photo that was hidden at the deepest part of the drawer. He took the photo and his chest tightened. In that photo was a young lady, smiling so beautifully as she displayed her graceful demeanor. At the bottom left corner of the photo was a date that stated the year the photo was taken. Exactly 26 years ago. Suddenly, a subordinate of his suddenly came in with a den mushi and he immediately shoved the photo back inside the drawer. A call from Sabo-kun. The guy informed as he handed the snail over to his leader before leaving him alone. Sabo-kun? Ah, Dragon-san. Dragon heard the younger male's voice on the other line before another familiar voice that he hadn't heard for quite some time suddenly joined in. Yoo-hoo Dragon, dis is V. Dragon smiled slightly as he listened to the familiar way of talking that could only belong to one person. It appears that you've finally decided to show yourself. All because of your son. Ivankov pointed out. By the way, Dragon, have you heard about Kuma? V can't believe what happened to him. He didn't even recognize V at all. Dragon sighed. I'll explain that later to you. Are you two still with them? This time, Sabo responded. No, we're not. Naru went back to the New World with Ace and the rest of the Whitebeard pirates. Luffy is on his way to Amazon Lily with Rayleigh-san and the Shichibukai, Boa Hancock. Dark King Rayleigh, that is unexpected. Anyhow, that boy will be fine, Dragon said, before he changed the topic. Those of the East Blue apparently had found Nico Robin among the rescued slaves. Oh, she's a part of Luffy's crew. Sabo stated. Before I left, Luffy recorded a message for his crew. I assume that Nico Robin already got the message if she chose to stay with us for the time being. I heard that she actually accepted our invitation, Dragon said, meaning that she already got her captain's message to meet up with the rest in 2 years. Will you be coming to Baltigo, Eva? V will, once V returned back to Kamabaka Kingdom first. Very well. With our current situation, we need to call out the other commanders from all over the world. Now that the war in Marineford has ended, things are changing and we will have to make a move. V understand. With Naru's group. After being refused by Ace to stay over in Uzu for a while, Naru and Marco exchanged their Den Den Mushi's numbers with each other just in case they needed anything. With Marco being in charge of the crew at the moment, they would have to strategize and make final decisions for the future of their crew. She heard that some of them considered the idea of leaving and disbanding the crew. However, since she wasn't a part of the crew, Naru didn't have the right to get involved in their affairs. After a small farewell between the siblings, Naru left with her own group as they rode on Kurama's back all the way to Uzu since they didn't have a ship with them. Also, the birds that they used to get to Marineford had already left first, so they didn't really have a proper transportation. Thankfully for her own peace of mind, the journey had been a smooth ride for them as they didn't encounter any problem along the way. Crossing over the Sea of Whirlpool easily, they finally reached the calm part of the blue sea that surrounded the island when it was late evening. With Kurama being almost as big as a mountain, the whole group was immediately spotted by the people at the island's one and only port. Since the sun would be down soon, there were not that many people at the port. The people waved excitedly upon seeing them, in which Naru and the friendly Kana waved at them back. Once they reached the port, Kurama disappeared back into his seal. Ah, it's good to be back, Daizu, the little redhead said. I miss my bed. Hyde yawned. The others didn't say anything, but they were also glad to be back as they relaxed their stiff postures. This place was what they called home, after all. There was no better place than a home for them to return to. Well then, let's go back before it gets dark, Naru said as she walked forward, leading the group as they walked down the familiar path that directly connected the port to the center of the island where 80% of its population lived there, including them. Since the island was surrounded by whirlpools, Naru decided to name it Uzu, exactly the same name as in the land of Uzu that she heard before in her past life. Even though she named her island after a hidden village, she didn't use the hidden village system in her kingdom. At the center of the island, there was a very large lake that connected to the sea via 2 main rivers located on the west and east side of the island. The path that they used just now was located at the north side, where there was the one and only port available. Currently, 2 more ports were being built at the east and west side of the island. Following this path, it would lead them directly to the one and only town where most of its citizens chose to live. The town itself revolved around the main lake of the island. After some time, they saw the familiar sight of a huge gate with a spiral symbol on top of it. Once they walked past the gate, they were greeted with the sight of many different kinds of people from different races, sizes and colors. Since the world nobles preferred diversity in their slave collection, there were a lot of people that came from different races and tribes that she saved and eventually brought here. Humans, fish men, merfolks, even those from the long leg and long arm tribes. There were also a couple of giants here, but they chose to live around the mountain since they were too big to live in the town. The human race had the most number of people here, followed by the fish men and merfolks, then the long leg and long arm tribes, while the Go and Nalan Yu is the only skypine. Most of them bear the slave mark, which later had been changed into a spiral symbol by Naru herself with a harmless method for those who wished to remain here. Only some merfolks and fishmen who hadn't been branded with that horrible mark chose to return back to their homes since they were not used to the surface yet. And with the late Whitebeard's help, Naru managed to send them back safely to the Fishman Island. As for the rest, with King Neptune's permission, they chose to stay here and became her citizens. Welcome back, Naru-sama. They've returned. Ah, Yuzu-san and Yu-san look as charismatic as the last time I've seen them. Arg. Hyde-kun just winked at me. Barlow-san, you're back. Kana-chan, let's play together tomorrow. Being welcomed merrily like this by a lot of people certainly flustered her in the beginning, but it also gave her a sense of peace and warmth in her heart when she saw the happiness from them. Forming this so-called empire wasn't actually her intention when she brought the first batch of people that she saved to this island. It was all started when she rescued the slaves, giving them a temporary place for them to stay, getting to know each other and accepting one another regardless of their backgrounds, until they just happened to live together in harmony without any prejudices or discrimination against one another. Time passed, and they ended up building their own civilization with her as the leader. The process, of course, was slow. They went from living under a tent to building their own small cottages, until more stable and durable houses and buildings with different styles and shapes were built. And suddenly their little camp of refugees turned into a small village beside the lake until it eventually transformed into a town, a home for most of them. Naru was proud to say that they all worked together for this empire to exist. The first 3 years since Uzu was formed, the only activities that her people did were hunting, fishing and farming. Just to be safe, Naru didn't encourage them to do anything that required them to leave the island until she was capable enough to ensure their safety. After all, she did steal them from the world nobles, and the fishmen were considered expensive in the slave market. Plus, with a certain admiral kept hunting her down, she just didn't want to risk anything. Then, knowing that Uzu still needed to grow, she let them do some businesses like selling food supplies or fixing ships as a service for those outsiders that came to this island with their log poses. Little by little, shops started to open, and her little empire finally was able to gain some profit for itself. While Naru didn't lack money, she would still end up broke if she kept using her own money for almost everything. Thus, it was good that her people were able to help with the development of their economy little by little. Uzu was still 6 years old now. There were many more rooms for further development in the future. With the 6 of them living in the same residence, Naru and the others strolled through the street together until they reached a traditional-looking house. This house was one of the first houses to be built, thanks to Barlow, who was also quite talented in building houses and some furniture using the resources that could be found in Uzu. Since the house was the first proper building to be built, the other citizens used this house as the main example to build their own houses. As time passed by, Uzu resembled more and more of the civilization in her past life, especially with how most of the citizens chose to dress themselves, following her kimono style that she wore casually around the island on normal days. And most of the buildings that were built were also based on her preferences. It just happened that she liked the minka style. And her people, her really nice citizens, were just so eager to please her that they followed everything that she liked. Arrived, Naru pushed open the gate, only for something purple to launch itself into her embrace. The purple thing, which revealed itself to be a little girl between 5 to 6 years old, looking up at Naru with a wide affectionate smile. "Welcome home, mama." With a fond smile, Naru picked her up easily and carried the little girl around her hip. "Ah, is Tama-chan waiting for mama?" "N." The little girl nodded her head, wrapping her small arms around the woman's neck. "What a good child." Naru ruffled her hair. "Did Tama-chan miss mama a lot?" "N. Really? How much?" "This SSSSS much," the purple-haired girl responded, opening her arms as wide as she could to tell her mother of how much she had missed her, melting everyone's heart at how cute she was at the moment, especially when they looked at those 2 big sparkly eyes. "Tama only cares about her mama and forgot about us. Ayah, what to do?" Yuzu sighed with a feigned sadness. "Tama-chan, how could you?" Kana whined as she put the back of her hand on her forehead dramatically. "What to do?" Hyde snorted, before he shook his head at the brown-haired woman. "You're too ugly to be remembered anyway." "Oh, say that again." Yuzu responded with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Before they could break into a fight, Naru interrupted them. "You two are already this big and still acting like a pair of children? In front of a child no less. Shame on you." Naru frowned at them. Barlow just shook his head at them while Yu said nothing. They were already used to this. Seeing that the two were getting scolded by her mother, Tama immediately intervened. "I didn't forget, Tama also missed everyone." "Ah, Tama-chan is the sweetest Dazu, since the little lady is being so kind today. Here, this one is for you." Hyde gave the little girl a small candy, much to her joy. What about me?" Kana pouted, before smiling brightly when she received the same candy from Hyde. Naru and Barlow just stared disapprovingly at him. "It's no good to give the children sweets before dinner," the eldest said sternly. "We promise not to eat the candy now," Kana quickly said, and Tama nodded in agreement. "Well, can't expect anything from him anyway." Yuzu looked at him in disdain, much to his annoyance. "Enough. Let's just get inside." Naru sighed as she led the rest inside the residence. Tama was still clinging close to her mama as she listened to Uncle Hyde's fun stories of their adventures. After dinner, they all returned back to their own room, or in Barlow's case, to his little cabin that he built in that bamboo forest in the backyard. That guy preferred to be alone in a quiet place while the others had their own room in the house. Living together was not weird for them as they had been together since the first day they met each other. Especially Naru, Yuzu and Hyde who had known each other for 10 years. Inside Tama's room, Naru was putting on the blanket to cover up the girl who was sound asleep while letting out a soft snore. When she looked at her, Naru remembered the first time she met her adopted daughter. Yes, adopted daughter. Naru went to Wano once due to a promise that she made with old man Kozaburo, only to see a malnourished dying woman almost resembling a skeleton as she held onto a skinny baby in her arms. With her last dying breath, the woman called out to Naru the intruder, to take care of her daughter whose name was Tama. Since someone already reached out to her, there was no reason for Naru to not help. So she took the baby away from Wano and brought her back to Uzu. In the end, the baby grew up and acknowledged Naru as her parent. Tama knew that they were not blood-related, as Naru didn't hide anything regarding her adopted daughter's origin. It might be weird to see a teen to become a mother at such a young age, but Naru was already an adult mentally and spiritually. She was already over 30 years old in her mind when she took Tama away from Wano. Thus, she couldn't act like a teen when she wasn't even one to begin with. That natural maternal instinct that came out every time she was dealing with a child. Plus, taking care of Tama wasn't actually that hard, considering the experiences that she had with Luffy and Ace when they were babies. And she was glad to say that her decision to take Tama away from Wano was one of the best decisions that she had ever made. Wano was not a good place for her to grow up properly. Especially when Naru herself had seen how horrible that place was. That place was total hell. It was completely different from what old man Kozaburo had told her about Wano years ago. But considering the fact that the old man himself had left decades ago, some things were bound to change. Sighing, Naru left the room, closed the door and walked away, heading straight to her room. Inside her room, she saw a pile of documents on her desk. Groaning, she went to pick them up before going over to her bed and making herself comfortable. Since she was now a leader of an empire who was responsible for the well-being of her people, reading documents was one of her duties that she needed to do in order for her to keep up with Uzu's current affairs. Calling herself the Uzukage wasn't just to fulfill her once childhood dream, but also because she had accepted her duties and responsibilities to make sure that her people could live their lives in peace with no worries. Flipping through the papers, one of them caught her attention. Another bunch of newcomers, huh? It was precisely a report saying about this new group of people who wanted to stay here permanently. Which meant that she had to go and see these people herself tomorrow morning. Those who wished to live here would be put away separately from the others, so that the leader herself would come and check to see if they would be allowed to live here or not. That was one of her own laws that she decided. Just because some people wanted to stay here, it didn't mean that she would let them be just like that. Every place had their own rules, and hers wasn't excluded. Naru wasn't that picky actually, but it was more because she just wanted to avoid unnecessary troubles. Her sensitivity to negative feelings and emotions from people around her made her extra careful in accepting random people into her own land. The last thing that she wanted was to invite an enemy into her own territory. While she couldn't fully prevent nasty people from intruding her place completely, it was still good to be prepared. After all, she didn't want another martial deed teach in her own land. Ever since she opened Uzu for outsiders 3 years ago, a lot of people had been visiting this place. One of the reasons why people were interested to come here was because of the existence of merfolks and fishmen, which was quite a rare sight, especially the young and beautiful mermaids. Among those who came were pirates, mercenaries, marines and ordinary people etc. Naru didn't mind who came to her place, but she also made it clear that whoever dared to mess around in her own place would be kicked out by herself. There were even people who were either brave or stupid enough to come here with the intention to steal some information about Uzu. Unfortunately for them, Naru kept valuable things like treasures and important documents in her storage seals. Hence, it could be said that she was the hardest person anyone wanted to steal from. Since it was a widely known knowledge that most people of Uzu were once the slaves of the world nobles, some outsiders took advantages by mocking the locals and degrading their status for who they were before. Not only that, but kidnapping attempts often happened to her people too. And the most targeted ones were usually the mermaids. Since mermaids were quite expensive in the slave market, some fools thought so lowly of herself for thinking that they could actually take her own people in her own territory. When those fools were caught by her, she beat them up and locked them inside the underground prison for breaking her laws. After a couple of days, they were released back to the sea with nothing but a raft for them to use to sail the hell away from Uzu. Because of that incident, the mermaids didn't dare to even show up on the surface. Since most merfolks and fishmen stayed underneath the lake and sea around the island, they didn't even dare to leave their places until most of the outsiders left. They were fine with their own people, as in the Uzu citizens, but to those who didn't belong here, they were quite wary of them. After all, traumas of being captured and enslaved didn't just go away that easily. Naru didn't blame them. Thus, not wanting to let the same thing happen again, Naru put the 2 giants to guard around the island and kick away anyone who dared to stir up troubles. When she said, kick away, she literally meant a good solid kick from the 2 giants. And due to safety issues, Naru had to enforce many laws around here, especially to outsiders. Anyone who dared to inflict harm upon her people would be punished personally by the Azukage herself. And since she herself was quite famous for being outrageous even with Admiral Akainu, nobody dared to do anything that could land themselves in trouble. When it came to the manpower of her island, Naru had her 4 companions, the 2 giants, and of course her clones to secure the safety of the place. But Naru was pleasantly surprised when her people who could fight voluntarily took on the role of being the warriors that protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Since she was known as the official ruler with the Azukage as her title, the people also viewed Yuzu, Hyde, Yu and Barlow as her 4 generals of Uzu, which was funny because they themselves had never discussed about all of these official titles that were forced upon them. And since there was no harm with the situation, the 4 just accepted it and just let the citizens call them the 4 generals of Uzu. Kana wasn't included since she was only like 7 or 8 when this happened. And as the generals, the duty of training those who wished to be the warriors of Uzu naturally became their responsibility. Like Barlow who specialized in martial arts, Yuzu with her excellent swordsmanship, Yu and her great shooting ability, and also Hyde who was responsible for hockey training. Needless to say, the training went well and Naru didn't need to waste her chakra to produce a lot of clones just to watch over the island anymore. Because of the increased number of people guarding the island and keeping the citizens safe, the merfolks and fishmen didn't have to worry about exposing themselves to outsiders anymore. All in all, they did great and everything went well. Keeping away all of the documents to the side, Naru yawned and decided to get a well-deserved rest now. Drifting slowly into her dreamland, her last thought was about how tomorrow would be a busy day for her. The next day, Naru went to the place where those who wished to live here permanently were gathered. When she arrived, she saw a lot of people waiting for her. An obvious nervousness could be seen from them as they shifted their eyes nervously to her from time to time. Most of them were young adults and children. Because she didn't feel a particular bad feeling from them, she had already made her decision once she observed them for a while. The others watched as the person who radiated such a strong dominant aura talked to the town's mayor who stayed next to her respectfully about something that they couldn't hear. After what seemed like years to them, although it had been only a couple of minutes, she finally stopped talking to the mayor and now was heading towards them. With a friendly smile, she asked, "Do you guys find yourself comfortable around here?" Worried that she would not let them stay here if they gave her an unsatisfactory answer, they tried their best to answer as pleasantly as possible. Which to her was a little bit funny seeing them being so enthusiastic in trying to please her because she knew that they were just being truthful. Like how they said that this place was beautiful with the flora and fauna, the uniqueness of the buildings, and the friendliness shown by the people here despite being different from each other. Naru was pleased. Even the mayor beside her appeared to be very proud with that big smile on his face as he listened to these people praising Uzu and so on. "I'm glad you guys are enjoying your stay here. Congratulations, from now on, all of you here are a part of Uzu." Then she proceeded with the speech about how as a citizen of this empire, they were required to be respectful of each other and obey the laws to avoid unnecessary troubles. Even if she accepted them, they could still be punished and kicked out of this place if they ever had any ill thought, which they suddenly promised her that they would forever be loyal citizens to her. Satisfied with what she heard, she handed over the next process of officially turning them into Uzu citizens, to the mayor. Something like checking their backgrounds, filling up some documents to get their identification cards which had been fused with her chakra to make sure that they couldn't be fabricated, and telling them the laws of Uzu and the proper history of their empire. Seeing that she still had some time before going back to her residence, Naru decided to take a walk around the island to check upon the living condition of her people. What was a better way to get a clear situation of her own empire than visiting and interacting with her people herself? Naru was always known for her friendly interaction with her own people, so it wasn't a surprising sight to see the Azukage strolling around the island, greeting everyone and asking about their days. The people were naturally happy, unlike some marines and pirates who caught on the side of the infamous monkey D. Naru who was also involved in the Paramount War a few days ago. Naru welcomed everyone who visited her island, whether they were marines or pirates, as long as they stayed out of trouble. Most of them were here for supplies, so she didn't do anything to them. She was amused though, when some pirates hastily walked away from her as if she was going to blast them away with a rinnegan. "Hey!" Taking a bite of the apple that she had gotten for free from that one kind old lady who owned a fruit stall, she suddenly saw Kurama with his 9 tails swaying behind him as he walked proudly between the mountains. The sight of the Kyuubi surprised everyone who hadn't seen the rumored 9-tailed fox with their own eyes yet. Unlike the outsiders, the locals only waved at the fox, for this was a normal sight for them since the protector of Uzu always came out to show himself once in a while. "That's the fox from Marineford," someone yelled out in surprise. "Idiot! Shut up, the Azukage is right over there." "Eep." Then they suddenly ran away when they saw her looking at them. Naru's sweat dropped and could only shake her head slowly. Then she stared at the huge form of that darn furball who had chosen a perfect spot for him to nap on, which was on top of the mountain, letting everyone see him. What a show-off. She rolled her eyes. "I can hear you," was what she heard in her head. Reaching the residence in no time via her usual ninja style, she saw Yuzu at the courtyard practicing her swordsmanship like she often did at this time of the day. Landing on the ground with gracefulness, Naru asked her about the two youngest children of their whereabouts. They went out to play. Yuzu answered and continued to swing her sword even though she had already noticed the ravenette's arrival. Naru nodded, before she went to sit on the wooden bench nearby. The others? Who knows? I'm not their babysitter. Yuzu shrugged her shoulders. Feeling that she had trained enough for today, she kept away her sword, before walking over to where Naru was and sat down next to her. For a while, they didn't speak. The two women just sat there side by side as they enjoyed the gentle breeze of the wind and the warmness of the sunlight. After a while, Yuzu was the one who opened her mouth first. You know what they called me? Naru turned to look at her and noted the amusement flashing through her hazel eyes. What? A traitor. Then she broke into a fit of laughter as if she had just remembered something funny. Well, to her, her situation was kinda funny. Yuzu hadn't appeared in 10 years, causing a sudden ruckus over her disappearance a decade ago. But nobody expected that when she appeared, she was now the subordinate of the Azukage. Didn't it mean that she was also involved in the crimes against the world nobles? Therefore, she was now known to the world as a traitor. How laughable. Not like she actually gave a shit. And Naru knew more than anyone else how much Yuzu couldn't care less about those people. There were no feelings between them. No love, and no hate. The swordswoman just simply didn't care about them. Or else, she wouldn't think of running away from Mary Joieuse in the first place. So when Yuzu was suddenly dubbed as the traitor, she found it to be quite funny. She knew that the reason for that was merely because of a certain secret that those people were afraid that one day, it would be exposed. After all, she used to be a part of them. You know, I heard that Daffy's business with Kaido is going well these days. You mean the making of the artificial devil fruits? Indeed. Naru sighed. The fact that he is related to Kaido means that we can't afford to offend him at the moment. For now, just stay away from anything that is related to Doflamingo. Yuzu just hummed, acknowledging her words. She didn't miss the other meaning of her words though. Then, are we going to do something to him in the future? If we don't cross paths or if he doesn't look for trouble, then I don't see the reason why we should get involved in his matter. True. Yuzu said without much emotion. Silence consumed them once again, but it was a good kind of silence as they simply enjoyed each other's company. I want to talk to everyone, Naru suddenly said. She wasn't merely stating that she wanted to see them, but she was stating her order for the others to come and have a talk with her as a leader. Yuzu understood. Very well. Inside the meeting room, there was a long table with Naru sitting at one end. Yuzu and Yu sat on her left side, while Hyde and Barlow sat on her right side. There were only 5 of them here, since Kana was out playing with Tama. The girl was still too young anyway, so her presence here was pretty much unnecessary. To start the meeting, Barlow brought out a few pieces of papers and placed them in the middle. These are our newly acquired wanted posters. Naru-san, it seems that you have the highest bounty among us. Hyde took the wanted posters to get a closer look. Phew Naru, they put more than just 1 billion berry as your second bounty. And what could the crazy woman worth more than me? Even Yu's bounty is higher than mine. After the battle in Marineford, they already expected that they would get a bounty for each one of them, except for Kana. While the girl did come with them, she didn't reveal herself until they left that place. After showing up with such a grand entrance, getting involved with the war and being associated with someone as dangerous as their leader here, it was impossible for them to not get a bounty. As a matter of fact, they very much anticipated it. And as expected, Naru had the highest bounty among them, followed by Yuzu. Then Barlow, Yu and lastly Hyde who had the lowest bounty, much to his disappointment and Yuzu's enjoyment. Don Quixote Dorothy, Yuzu, 500 million berry. She was worth that much due to her betrayal against the world government. A traitor indeed, for siding with the enemy that could threaten their own existence. Fufu, how interesting. Barlow, 430 million berry. As someone who could fight with Admiral Aokiji evenly and his involvement with Naru, he followed closely behind Yuzu. Nolan Yu, 390 million berry. With her destructive powers by shooting her own feathers from her wings that had been witnessed by a lot of people, giving her that much was also quite understandable. And lastly, Hyde who possessed the ability to weaken the enemy's 5 senses, 370 million berry. Ahahahahahaha, they actually claimed Yu as a traitor. While he was dejected that his bounty was lower than Yu's, he couldn't help but to laugh when he saw Yuzu's wanted poster. They actually used her crazy expression when she fought Doflamingo as her wanted poster. Yuzu's previous name was Dorothy from the Don Quixote family. In fact, her late father was actually the younger brother of Don Quixote Homing. That made her and a certain Shichibukai a cousin to each other. 10 years ago, she disappeared without any traces. And because of her identity as a world nobles, her going missing was a big deal in Mary Joieuse. The people there were fussing over her disappearance not because they were worried, but merely because they thought that someone was daring enough to kidnap a world noble. Searching and failing, she was soon considered to be dead. Until a few days ago. Who would imagine that a world noble to completely disregard her own status and work beneath someone else who in the eyes of the world nobles, was their most hated enemy? So to call her a traitor, there was nothing wrong with that. Yuzu was amused though. Now that they are aware of your identity, Yuzu-san, I'm afraid that from now on they will definitely pay more attention to you. They are not going to let you off that easily, you said. Fu. Like I care. Yuzu grinned at the younger girl. Let them come if they want to. I'll cut them one by one. As always, the savage woman. Hyde sighed. Then what are we going to do now? Barlow suddenly asked, preventing a conflict from happening between the two. Yuzu and Hyde just rolled their eyes at each other before staring at Naru like the rest. Since we've already exposed ourselves to the world, then we have to be more alert from now on. Keep an eye out for anyone or anything that seems suspicious. Naru warned them. However, for now, I am confident that the world government will not do anything to offend us yet. Unless of course, if they want me to come and destroy their place completely. Sounds fun to me. Yuzu mumbled to herself. Not replying to the brown-haired woman's comment, Naru continued. Also, we don't have to concern ourselves with the Marines. The ones that we need to be wary of are the higher-ups and Marie-Joies since they are the ones in control of the entire government. Since everyone knows that Yuzu is here, they might do something later. Yuzu just shrugged her shoulders like she didn't care that much. Well, if you must know, my father was killed by my cousin before he could pass down whatever knowledge that I was supposed to inherit. And contrary to what those retards are probably assuming, I know nothing of their secrets whatsoever. Actually, most of them are just crazy. So, does Doflamingo know something? Hyde asked. Why do you think he managed to run free despite all of his past actions? Fu. It's all because he actually threatened them with whatever it is that he knows. She said, looking at the older man like he was an idiot. Believe me, if he didn't have anything to guarantee his safety, he would be dead before he could even leave that place. TCH, isn't he your cousin? Why don't you go ahead and investigate him yourself? He taunted her. Our leader San said not to cause troubles, you uncultured swine. That is to be expected. Barlow suddenly interfered before those two could argue yet again. According to Naru-san's info, Doflamingo has a connection with Kaido. It would be unwise for us to do anything that can offend them. After all, it isn't like we have anything to do with them in the first place. Kaido is different from Big Mom. You added. Do you get it now? Of course I know all that. Hyde muttered under his breath, avoiding their eyes as he stared at the wall. Naru shook her head. Then suddenly, she heard a sudden footstep from outside of the room heading here in great urgency. Knock. The five of them looked at each other, before Naru signaled the one outside to enter. A young warrior entered the room with an anxious look on his face. He saluted Naru first before doing the same to the other four. What is it? There's a sighting of a ship that is believed to belong to a world noble, just passed through the Whirlpool Sea and now heading to Uzu. Just one ship? Yes, Naru-sama. Naru looked at the others. Shall we go and take a look? A world noble coming to Uzu? They glanced at each other. Yuzu grinned. Interesting. Because it was strange for someone with the status of a world noble to come here regardless of what purpose, Naru decided to take a look. The others naturally came with her. It would be absurd if they dared to let their own Azukage to see the enemy on her own. When they arrived at the port, many people were already gathered there, staring and pointing to a grand-looking ship not far from the shore. With a unique identity as a world noble, nobody there didn't recognize the significant ship of the world government, wondering why someone from Marie-Joies even dared to come to their own enemy's territory. Naru nodded in acknowledgement when the warriors saluted her and the four generals with respect. The Marines were waiting restlessly for the ship to be docked. Since they worked for the world government, if they didn't show up to receive this lord properly, it would be their heads that would be rolling on the ground later on. They tensed as the ship was getting closer and closer. They hoped more than anyone else here that this person, whoever it was, would not be too stupid to offend that great lord over there. The Paramount War wasn't even that long ago. They really couldn't afford to fight now. Not to mention that this was the enemy's territory. Just looking at those two giants with their massive clubs ready to be thrown at the direction of the ship only made them even more nervous. The pirates simply didn't give a shit as they chose to move far away from the port, not wanting to get involved at all. They refused to get in trouble by offending either the world noble or the Azukage, and this place wasn't just the place for them to simply do whatever they wanted. As for the common people, they were also nervous. Especially the Uzu citizens. Even though they were no longer slaves, but they were still traumatized by what happened to them. There was that sense of fear of the possibility that they would be dragged back from their home to that horrible place. But seeing the calm Azukage in front of them, they immediately relaxed and discarded their fear. Yes, with their beloved Azukage by their side, why should they be afraid? With that thought in mind, they straightened their backs with pride over their ruler. TLVES, Naru-sama always told them to lift their heads with pride, and to not simply cower before their enemies. They were no longer a slave, they were free. When the ship arrived, a lone person disembarked. They saw a man with green hair styled into that familiar hairstyle among the world nobles, wearing that protective suit that stated his identity as one of them. However, he lacked the usual bubble that was often used by the world nobles to avoid sharing the same dirty air with the lowly commoners. Some fishmen who were staring at the man widened their eyes in horror upon recognizing who he was, as awful memories kept on playing inside their heads. The Marines greeted him with a respectful bow reluctantly, and out of habit, the others, including the Uzu people, almost lowered themselves to the ground, only to halt their movements as if they were suddenly struck by lightning when they realized that the only person that they were willing to lower themselves to was their savior. Not this man, and so, they straightened their backs once again before glaring directly at the man, who didn't seem to be fazed by his surroundings. He just ignored everyone and everything as he walked over to where Naru was and stood before her. Naru didn't say anything, and didn't seem like she would be opening her mouth anytime soon. Despite the amiable smile on her face as she looked at him, she also acted like this guy wasn't really there, expecting him to burst into anger. Nobody expected him to suddenly show everyone a humble smile, and greeted the Azukage himself. "Greetings, Azukage Dono." Everyone widened their eyes in shock. Was this really a world noble, or simply an imposter looking for his own death? Despite the commotion around them, Naru didn't slight him. Since he was genuinely being polite, why wouldn't she be polite too? "Hello," she responded with just one word. He didn't seem to be offended. "Ahahaha, it is good to finally be able to see the great Azukage Dono. As expected, you look even more beautiful in person." Naru and the other four raised their eyebrows. A friendly and humble world noble. That was unexpected. She didn't sense any sign of fakeness and pretentiousness from this person, so she figured that he wasn't that bad for someone with a godlike status. He even added an honorific to her title. "Interesting. I am not aware of what you're called, and for what reason does a world noble like you to be here, in Uzu?" Her words could be considered rude, and the rows of Marines behind the man all became tense. They didn't know what to do in this situation. They were just a bunch of low-ranking Marines, and they didn't have the experience on how to deal with this kind of situation. One was a world noble, and the other one was the big boss of this place. "I am called Myasgard, from the Don Quixote family." He merely introduced himself. He then looked at Yuzu, who stood quietly behind Naru, trying to see her reaction, but the brown-haired woman did not say anything. She didn't even show any sort of reaction upon hearing the familiar name. "Oh, so you're like what? A family of Yuzu?" Hyde asked mockingly. Since Yuzu's identity had already been exposed, the Uzu people surprisingly didn't show any negative reaction to her background. Instead, they respected her even more. Now this man, coming here for what? For their General Yuzu? Knowing that world nobles were no good, they all glared at this so-called Lord Myasgard. With so many people glaring, sneering and scowling at him, it could be said that Uzu was the only place where one could be rude to a world noble and still be alive to see the next sunrise. "I am humbly requesting a personal audience with Azukage Dono and Miss Dorothy." Then he bowed his head to Naru. As Lord Myasgard requested, Naru led him to follow them back to her personal office. On their way there, nobody said a word. Lord Myasgard tried several times to start a small talk, but didn't have the courage to do so when he sensed the coldness coming from these people. And Yuzu, she didn't even spare him a glance as she found him to be insignificant in her eyes. So what if he was a fellow clansman? She had already cut ties with every single thing that could link her to Mary Joieuse, including her so-called family. Since Naru or Yuzu didn't speak, the others also didn't say anything as they ignored the world noble. But the same couldn't be said about Lord Myasgard. Even though he was ignored, he still glanced at Yuzu from time to time. This woman was the one who had been spared by Doflamingo himself while the rest of her family had been killed by that tyrant. He remembered that time. He and the rest of his clansmen were so afraid to even close their eyes at night, just in case they weren't able to open their eyes ever again. That man could even kill his own family, let alone the rest of the insignificant members of the Don Quixote family who dared to reject Lord Homing's desperate request to save his wife. But for Doflamingo to spare Dorothy's life, he wondered why. He also didn't forget to observe the Azukage. As a world noble, calling her with a respectful honorific behind her title alone was very absurd. But he was a different man than he was before. This was all thanks to a certain mermaid who turned him into an actual human being with complete humanity. He heard that the people of Uzu also included the fishmen and merfolks. Hence, why he came here. Not to make trouble, but to admit his sins. This monkey D. Naru, ever since what happened in Mary Joieuse, the impression that he had over this woman could be said to be looking at a high goddess. Or demon. He was also there when a part of Mary Joieuse was destroyed. However, perhaps he was blessed by God that he was safe from the sudden attack since he was at his own mansion, which was the farthest away from the exploded place. He didn't join the rest when they were busy watching the war live, so he wasn't truly aware of what was going on, until he heard from one of his servants that the Azukage suddenly showed herself in Marineford and even bombed Mary Joieuse from that place with the intention to challenge the world government. When he heard that, Lord Mjosgard wondered what kind of guts that this Azukage had for doing such things. Even before her identity was revealed, Lord Mjosgard's respect for the woman was almost at the same level as a certain mermaid who shaped him into who he was today. He respected the Azukage for going against the world by rescuing slaves and turned them into her own citizens, thus giving them a new light of hope. He also heard that those people came from different backgrounds, races and tribes. Ever since he found out that there were also fish men and merfolks here, he had been waiting for a chance to be here. But due to the strong enmity between the Azukage and the world nobles, he couldn't just go and draw some troubles to himself. After all, the Azukage and the world nobles were not on good terms. Looking at the proud back of the Azukage, Lord Mjosgard was having mixed feelings with a troubled expression on his face. He couldn't help but to think that this woman was really familiar to him. How could they be so similar? He wondered with a slight anxiousness in his chest. As for what he was thinking about, only he knew. When he found out about the Azukage's extraordinary identity and the possible heiress of the Don Quixote clan that went missing 10 years ago, he made a hasty decision to come here regardless of what would happen to him. He had no doubt that after this day, his actions would definitely reach the ears of those people. But still, regardless of how those people would think of him later on, Lord Mjosgard truly didn't care. He came here for one reason, and that reason couldn't be more pure than it was now. When he arrived at the port, he wasn't blind to the scornful look of everyone, especially from the commoners. Or to be exact, the former victims of the world nobles who were now the proud citizens of Uzu. The Marines received him just like how they were all the pirates, and those that didn't have any connection to Uzu wisely avoided him. He also saw how most of them unconsciously tried to get down on their knees when he got off the ship, only to be snapped out of their minds and stared at him directly without the need to cower in fear anymore. All those people who stood behind the four generals who also stood straight in lines behind the smiling Azukage. They didn't greet him, he greeted them instead, calling out the Azukage with an honorific. He also bowed his head as if he was presenting himself to his ruler. Ignoring the dumbfounded look of everyone there, he stated his purpose of being here and requested to seek a personal audience with the ruler herself. Which brought him to the current situation. Inside the office, Naru sat behind her table while the other four stood behind her. Lord Mjosgard sat nervously in front of them, obviously intimidated by the suffocating presence inside the room. They looked at him as if they were judging his sins. He was so nervous that he couldn't even find his courage to speak. "So, what is it that you want to talk about?" Naru started. Since the person herself had spoken, he opened his mouth. I heard that Miss Doro." "Call me Yuzu." The former world nobles cut him off rudely, smiling as she did so. Lord Mjosgard was startled, but he composed himself and said, "Why yes. I heard that Miss Yuzu is here. After knowing that Miss Yuzu is doing well, I chose to come here and greet her myself." "That's very kind of you," Yuzu commented sarcastically. "But too bad, I simply don't give a damn about you old farts from that place. Speak, what is it that you truly want? Are you here to curry favor, now that our leader is now known to everyone?" "TCH. He must be here because he was told to do so." Hyde spoke. "What else could he be here for? He must have been ordered to try and find some secrets for them." "Naru, this guy is definitely bad. Don't think that we will fall for your evil plans so easily." Being slandered so openly like this, Lord Mjosgard was so terrified that his face turned white from fright. "And no, you have mistaken, I didn't come here with bad intentions. I truly did come here to see Miss Yuzu." Naru just observed him with a deep look. Since she didn't say anything yet, nobody else spoke. Moments passed in the silent office, causing Lord Mjosgard to be even more nervous. "There is another reason for you to be here," Naru stated. When he flinched, she knew that she was right. Seeing Yuzu was just a tiny matter. While he was being sincere with his actions and words so far, Naru knew that the world noble was hiding something. He was just hesitating. Lord Mjosgard sighed. As expected, in front of this capable person, he couldn't hide anything. "Azukage Dono is right," he admitted. "I came for another reason, and that is, to see those who originated from the Fishman Island." Interested, Naru asked, "Why? You're aware that they are now my people and under my protection. I would be damned if I ever let something bad happen to them." She gave him a warning. It didn't matter if she didn't feel anything bad from him, but her people's safety was her top priority. Plus, she also needed to consider their feelings. This man right here, no matter if he was good or bad, he would definitely cause an emotional turmoil among the people for simply being a world noble alone. Earlier, she saw how her own people almost lowered themselves to him without them realizing it. It displeased her, of course, but she was also proud because in the end they managed to hold themselves back. Even though they were now freed from their shackles, they still needed more time to heal their wounds. One step at a time. Lord Mjosgard, who had been nervous the entire time, suddenly rose from his seat and bowed his body into a 90 position, surprising them. "I wish to apologize for my sins. Please, bring me to THRM." When the leaders who were appointed to lead the fishmen and merfolks were called to see the Azukage, they didn't question it. They immediately stopped whatever they were doing and went to see their leader. Olympus was a shark fish man who was responsible for the fishmen, and Kanana the mermaid who was already over 30 years old was responsible for the merfolks. Presenting themselves before their ruler, they were shocked to see Lord Mjosgard in the office too. Both recognized him to be the world noble who had been to Fishman Island demanding for his runaway slaves years ago. If it wasn't for Naru-sama being in the same room, they would definitely send a slap to this human. Thankfully for him, he didn't behave like how they expected him to, much to their surprises. He even greeted them with a humble and friendly smile. Then, Naru-sama suddenly told them to gather the adult fishmen and merfolks because apparently, this man wanted to say something. They frowned and wondered what kind of trick was he trying to play now. Both of you don't have to be so worried, he doesn't mean any harm, Naru said. Since the leader herself had said that, they naturally complied with her orders. They trusted in her words and immediately went to gather the fishmen and merfolks to a place. Who in Uzu didn't know that Naru-sama had this great ability to sense negative emotions, including evilness from people around her. It was because of her ability that Uzu managed to get rid of those with ill intentions. The people of Uzu didn't need a conflict among themselves. They wanted to live here in peace, later. When the adult fishmen and merfolks were gathered secretly without the younger generation, they wondered why. And when their appointed leaders, Olympus and Kanana told them that it was Naru-sama's order that they were to be gathered here, they figured that something must have gone wrong. They wondered if the reason they were here had anything to do with the world noble that came earlier today. Their assumption turned out to be right when Naru-sama suddenly appeared with the world noble that people had been talking about, causing them to have mixed feelings as they stared at the person. Most recognized him and some didn't even know his name. Even so, it didn't stop them from scowling at him. A world noble was still a world noble, so they didn't have a good impression of him at all. Their hatred for the world nobles was so strong due to what happened to them in the past. So for them to not welcome him with a friendly attitude like they always did with other outsiders was also very understandable. I know all of you are wondering why I requested all of you to be here without the younger generation. Naru started to speak. Lord Mjosgard stood quietly next to him with a troubled heart. How many of you here actually recognize this person? 2/3 of them raised their hands. Lord Mjosgard gulped, and Naru nodded without much expression on her face. She looked at him, before taking a couple of steps backwards. It was a signal for him to speak. He nodded at her, feeling grateful for this opportunity. Before taking a deep breath, trying to calm himself, he took the opportunity to look at these people that he had wronged in the past, whether directly or indirectly. He saw some of them glared at him in resentment, and he knew that they were the ones that had been his victims years ago. He wondered why they didn't scream and throw curses at him by now. But he knew that the only reason why he wasn't attacked by these people yet was because Naru was still here. And none of them wanted to disrespect her by acting like a group of people that didn't have any self-control over their emotions. With a guilty heart, he opened his mouth. First of all, I know that all of you hate me. Not just because I am one of them, but also because of the sins that I have committed against your people due to my greed and selfishness. I recognize some of you here are also used to be the victims of my unforgivable actions. I know that just an apology won't be enough to erase my sins. I treated some of you poorly, humiliated you, and I even almost killed the late Queen Ons. I apologize. Queen Otahime is a great figure. She changed me to be an actual human being with humanity. There is no amount of money or treasure that could repay her kindness. When I heard of her death, I was truly saddened. All these years, she made me realize how horrible of a person I was to a lot of people. Suddenly, he dropped to his knees, shocking not just Naru and her 4 generals, but also the fishmen and merfolks. Then, Lord Mjosgard knocked his head on the round as he cried out his sins, his regrets, and how sorry he was. I am worthless. I am useless. I am the worst, please forgive me. Needless to say, those that he was sorry to were speechless and dumbfounded. A world noble bowing down to them to apologize? A world noble? Seeing the man with a high status crying as he begged them for forgiveness, nobody felt happy or satisfied. Time passed, nobody said anything, and the sounds that could be heard were the waves and the harsh knocking sound as Lord Mjosgard punished himself in front of them. Unconsciously, one started to cry. Then 2, 3, until all of them let their own tears fall, hitting and mixing with the salty seawater around them. They didn't know why they cried, but they knew that what they felt at the moment was the feeling of relief. Like he said, among them, there were those who were bought and enslaved by this man himself before they were rescued by Fisher Tiger. They remembered how poor they were treated like a tool, a dirt, as a thing with value and a mere decoration for him. Even after they were rescued, he even chased them down to the Fishman Island just to take back what he believed belonged to him. The sufferings that they went through, none of them could forget that. But, seeing their hated enemy willingly lowered himself to the ground as he disregarded his identity as a world noble, crying and begging for their forgiveness, they realized that they didn't feel a sense of satisfaction with him treating himself like that. Instead, they felt warmth in their hearts, sadness and relief. They felt that sense of letting go of their hurtful pasts when he admitted his sins against them. One by one, They looked at him who was still crying with tears, snots and blood mixed together as he kept injuring his head by knocking himself to the ground. Olympus, who was also crying like the rest, couldn't take it anymore. He went and held Lord Mjosgard's shoulder in an attempt to stop him from injuring himself further. That's enough. But Lord Mjosgard didn't want to stop. Olympus grabbed his shoulders and shook him, and I said, "Look at them." Forced to stop, the world noble looked at the victims of the world's cruelty and was taken aback by what he saw. Why were they crying? He didn't understand. Weren't they supposed to be happy and loathe him even more? Weren't they supposed to be laughing, throwing insults and cursing him like what he deserved? Then, why were they crying right now? Confused, he looked at the crying Olympus next to him. "Why? We can't and will never forget what you and the rest of the world nobles have done to us," Olympus said. "But thank you. Thank you for giving us the chance to finally be able to let go of the horrible pasts and move on to a better future without the stone of resentment weighing down on our hearts." Sometimes, forgiving was hard. But what was even harder than trying to forgive someone was forgetting all of the wrongdoings that had been done upon them. Even worse when the ghosts of the past still lingered in their hearts and minds to haunt them. Day and night. Without any rest. Living in fear if the same thing were to happen to them again. Causing them to forget, and unable to move on. Perhaps, the reason why one couldn't forget was because one didn't get the closure that was needed to close the old chapters to start a new chapter in life. Lord Mjosgard cried harder. The fishmen and merfolks finally able to let go of their pasts.